The day I came home from the hospital after surviving what doctors called a serious cardiac event, my husband didn't ask how I felt. He slid a hospital bill across the kitchen table and said, "We don't have the money, Sarah. You'll have to figure this one out yourself." I believed him until a bank envelope addressed to him arrived by mistake. Inside was proof of a secret account holding more money than we'd ever saved together. In that moment, I realized the bill wasn't the biggest lie my husband had told me. It was only the beginning. If this story touches something in your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please like this video if you've ever believed in someone who didn't deserve your trust. Subscribe if you enjoy emotional family stories with unexpected twists. And before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Sometimes it's comforting to know we're not facing life's hardest moments alone. For most of my adult life, I believed a quiet marriage was the same thing as a safe one. My name is Sarah Garcia, and at 62 years old, I had reached the season of life where I thought surprises were behind me. Not all surprises, of course. I still hoped for small ones, a birthday dinner with my daughter Emily flying in from Denver, a fresh bloom on the rose bush near the back porch, a Sunday morning where the coffee tasted just right and the house was still warm from yesterday's sunlight. But the kind of surprise that breaks your whole life open, I thought I had already outgrown that. Michael and I had been married for 38 years. We lived in Columbus, Ohio in a cream-colored house with blue shutters and a narrow front porch that I decorated every fall with pumpkins and every Christmas with a wreath I had used for nearly 20 years. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. Or at least I believed it was ours. I had spent much of my working life as an office assistant at a family medical clinic. I knew the names of patients' grandchildren remembered who needed extra help filling out forms and kept a little jar of peppermint candies on my desk for nervous children. I was never rich, never powerful, never the kind of woman people noticed when she walked into a room. But I was steady, dependable, careful. Michael used to say that was what he loved about me. "You keep life from falling apart, Sarah," he would tell me in the early years. Usually when I was balancing a checkbook, packing Emily's lunch, or sewing a missing button onto his work shirt. Back then, I believed him. Michael had worked as a manager in the insurance business before retiring. Because of that, he understood policies, numbers, payments, claims, forms, all the complicated things that made my head ache if I stared at them too long. So over the years, I let him handle most of our finances. It seemed practical. He knew the system. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. Not because a wife should never trust her husband, but because trust without knowledge can become a locked room. And for years, I handed Michael the key without ever asking what was inside. Our life had a rhythm. I cooked most evenings. He watched the local news in the den. On Saturdays, I cleaned, watered my plants, and called Emily. On Sundays, we sometimes went to church, though Michael went less and less after retirement. He said his knees bothered him during long services, but I noticed he could stand for hours in the garage sorting through fishing gear. Fishing became his favorite escape. "Lake Erie clears my head," he would say. At first, I was glad he had something. Retirement had made him restless. He no longer had employees to direct or meetings to attend, and without that, he seemed smaller inside the house, irritable, easily offended. He complained about the neighbors parking too close to our driveway, the price of eggs, the sound of my radio in the kitchen. So when he started taking fishing weekends, I didn't object. He would leave early on Saturday with a small cooler, a duffel bag, and a fishing rod that looked almost too clean to be used. He always said he was meeting the guys, though he rarely named which ones. When I asked, he would wave his hand. "You don't know them, Sarah. Old work people." I accepted that. Wives from my generation were often taught that a man needed space, that asking too many questions made you difficult, that peace in a home was sometimes worth more than being right. So I chose peace. Still, there were little things, tiny cracks in the wall. Michael began getting the mail before I did. For almost our entire marriage, I had been the one to bring in the mail. I liked sorting it at the kitchen table, tossing out coupons, stacking bills, setting aside greeting cards. But suddenly, Michael developed a habit of stepping outside the moment the mail truck passed. "I'll get it," he would say almost too quickly. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then I noticed he didn't bring all of it inside. Sometimes he would stand at the end of the driveway sorting through envelopes before coming back. Other times, he would slip one or two pieces into the pocket of his jacket. When I asked, he smiled without warmth. Junk mail, nothing important. Another little crack. His phone changed too. Michael had never been secretive with his phone before. He used to leave it on the coffee table on the kitchen counter, even beside my chair when he went outside. But gradually it became attached to him like a second heartbeat. If it rang, he left the room. If a message came in, he turned the screen downward. If I walked near him while he was typing, he locked it. Once I teased him gently. "What are you doing writing love letters?" He looked at me so sharply that the smile fell from my face. "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. It was the kind of tone that made the air change. I apologized, even though I had done nothing wrong. That became another quiet habit in our marriage. Michael reacted, and I softened myself to make the room peaceful again. Money became a subject I learned to avoid. If I asked how much was in savings, he said enough. If I asked whether we should review our retirement plan, he said, I handled it. If I asked why our credit card bill seemed higher, he sighed like I had disappointed him. Sarah, I worked in insurance for 35 years. I know what I'm doing. And because I did not want to seem foolish, I stopped asking. Looking back, that hurts the most. Not just what Michael hid from me, but how easily he trained me to doubt my right to know. There were evenings when I sat in our kitchen watching him across the table, wondering when he had become a man I had to approach carefully. His hair had gone silver at the temples. His hands, once warm and familiar, had become restless, always tapping, reaching for his phone, folding papers, closing drawers before I came too close. But then he would do something ordinary, something that reminded me of the old Michael. He would fix a loose cabinet hinge. He would bring home my favorite cinnamon bread from the grocery store. He would ask if Emily had called. And I would tell myself I was imagining things. A long marriage teaches you endurance, but sometimes it also teaches you denial. You learn to step around uncomfortable truths the way you step around a creaky floorboard at night. You know it's there. You know it makes noise. But you convince yourself the house is still standing, so why make trouble? I believed our house was still standing. I believed Michael and I were simply aging differently. I believed the distance between us was normal after nearly 4 decades. Then one Thursday morning, while sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles and the coffee machine gurgled beside me, my chest tightened so suddenly that I dropped the mug in my hand. It shattered at my feet. For a second, I stared at the broken pieces like they belonged to someone else's life. Then the pain spread across my chest, heavy and crushing like an invisible hand pressing me backward. I reached for the counter. Michael, I tried to call, but my voice came out thin. He was in the den, close enough to hear me. The television was on low, some man talking about morning traffic on I-71. I tried again, louder this time. Michael. He appeared in the doorway, frowning first at the broken mug, then at me. What happened now? I remember that sentence clearly because of what it did to me. Not, are you okay? Not, Sarah. What's wrong? What happened? Now. I pressed one hand to my chest and tried to breathe. I think something's wrong, I whispered. His eyes moved over me, not with fear but irritation, as if my pain had interrupted something more important. And in that moment before the hospital, before the bill, before the envelope that would expose everything, a cold little truth passed through me. My husband was looking at me like I was a problem. Not a wife, not a woman he had loved for 38 years. A problem. The pain did not feel like what I had imagined a heart problem would feel like. It was not one sharp stab, not something dramatic like a scene from television where a person clutches their chest and collapses in one clean motion. It was heavier than that, slower, crueler. It spread across me like a weight being lowered onto my ribs, squeezing the air out of my lungs one breath at a time. I stood in the kitchen with one hand gripping the counter and the other pressed against my chest. Broken pieces of my coffee mug were scattered across the floor, dark coffee spreading between the tiles like a stain I could not stop. Michael remained in the doorway. For a second, neither of us moved. What happened now? He asked again. His voice clipped impatient. I tried to answer, but the words caught somewhere between my throat and my fear. My chest, I whispered. It hurts. His eyes narrowed, not with worry, but with annoyance. You probably pulled something, he said. You were moving those boxes in the pantry yesterday after I told you not to. I stared at him, trying to understand how he could be speaking to me like that while I could barely breathe. No, I said, shaking my head. This is different. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the counter harder. My knees felt soft, unreliable. A thin layer of sweat had broken out across my forehead, and my left arm had begun to ache in a way that scared me more than the pressure in my chest. Michael, I said, forcing his name out. Call 911. He glanced toward the den where the television was still murmuring. Sarah, don't start panicking. I'm not panicking. You get yourself worked up over everything. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I had spent 38 years not panicking. I had raised a child, managed doctor appointments, stretched grocery money, cared for his mother during her last winter, sat beside him through 2 surgeries, and carried more silent worry than he would ever know. But I did not have the strength. Please, I whispered. Call. Instead of reaching for the phone, Michael stepped into the kitchen and looked down at the broken mug. Now there's glass everywhere, he muttered. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Pain can frighten you, but indifference can break you. I had known Michael could be cold. I had known he could be dismissive. But standing there, struggling to breathe while he focused on a shattered mug, I felt a loneliness so deep it seemed to open beneath my feet. I tried to take one step toward the chair by the table, but my legs trembled. I grabbed the back of it just in time. From somewhere outside, I heard a car door slam. Then a few seconds later, a knock came at the side door. "Sarah," a woman's voice called. "Are you all right?" It was Linda Parker, our neighbor from across the street. Linda was 70, widowed, and the kind of woman who noticed everything. She noticed when trash cans stayed out too long, when porch lights burned out, when someone's newspaper sat untouched on the driveway. Some people called her nosy. I had always called her kind. She opened the side door before Michael could stop her. "I heard something break," she said. Then she saw me. Her face changed instantly. "Oh my God. Sarah." Michael turned toward her. She dropped a mug. "She's just worked up." Linda ignored him completely. She came straight to me, took one look at my face, and said, "I'm calling an ambulance." Relief hit me so hard my eyes filled with tears. Michael stiffened. "That's not necessary." Linda already had her phone out. "Yes, it is. Linda, this is a private family matter." She looked at him with a sharpness I had never seen in her before. "A heart attack is not a private family matter." The words heart attack seemed to hang in the kitchen. Michael's jaw tightened. I sank into the chair, breathing in shallow, uneven pulls. Linda stayed beside me, one hand on my shoulder, speaking calmly into the phone. She gave our address, described my symptoms, answered questions. Her voice was steady, but I could see fear in her eyes. Michael paced near the refrigerator. "I have an appointment," he said suddenly. Linda turned. "What I said, I have an appointment. I can follow later." I looked up at him. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. "You're not coming?" I asked. He avoided my eyes. "I said I'll follow later. There's something I can't miss." Linda's mouth opened slightly, but she said nothing. Maybe she knew, as I did, that some sentences reveal more than an argument ever could. The ambulance arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. 2 paramedics came through the side door with equipment, asking me questions, checking my blood pressure, placing stickers on my chest, speaking in quick, practiced phrases. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, asked, "Ma'am, when did the pain start?" "Just now," I said. "Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe more." "Any nausea?" "A little." "Pain down the arm?" "Yes." He exchanged a glance with his partner. Michael stood back by the counter, arms crossed as if strangers had invaded his morning. The paramedic asked, "Sir, are you her husband?" "Yes," Michael said. "Are you riding with us?" Michael hesitated. Before he answered, Linda said, "I'll go." I turned toward her, embarrassed even through my fear. "Linda, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she said softly. Michael gave a small shrug, almost relieved. "I'll meet you there," he said. But he didn't say it to me. He said it to the paramedic like he was confirming a delivery. They lifted me onto the stretcher. As they wheeled me through the kitchen, I looked back once. Michael was standing beside the broken mug, watching with an expression I could not read. Not fear. Not love. Something closer to inconvenience. At the hospital, everything became bright lights and clipped voices. I remember the smell first, antiseptic plastic tubing coffee from a nurse's station somewhere nearby. I remember Linda's hand holding mine as they rolled me into an exam room. I remember a nurse cutting through the sleeve of my blouse, and for some reason, that made me cry. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The nurse leaned close. "Honey, don't you worry about a blouse." They ran tests, blood work, EKG, monitors, questions, more questions. A doctor came in with a serious face and explained that I had not imagined anything. My heart was under stress. There were warning signs they could not ignore. I needed to be admitted for monitoring and further treatment. I nodded as if I understood every word, but all I could think was Michael isn't here. Linda stayed until late afternoon. She called Emily from my phone because my hands were shaking too badly to press the right buttons. When Emily answered, her voice was bright at first. "Hi, Mom." "Everything okay?" I heard myself say. "I'm at the hospital, honey." The silence that followed nearly broke me. "What? What happened? Where's Dad?" I closed my eyes. "He had an appointment." Linda looked away. Emily's voice changed. "An appointment. Mom, what kind of appointment?" "I don't know." That was the truth. And somehow at 62 years old, after 38 years of marriage, I realized how frightening it was not to know where your husband went when you needed him most. Michael arrived that evening for exactly 20 minutes. He walked into my hospital room carrying no flowers, no overnight bag, no concern, just his phone in one hand and his car keys in the other. "You scared everybody," he said. I was lying in bed with wires attached to my chest. "I scared everybody," I repeated. He sighed. "You know what I mean." "No," I thought. "I don't think I do." He asked a nurse when I might be discharged. He asked whether all these tests were necessary. He asked if insurance would cover the stay. He did not ask if I was afraid. He did not ask if I needed anything from home. He did not sit beside me until I asked him to. And even then, he perched on the edge of the chair like a man waiting for a bus. When his phone buzzed, he looked at the screen and immediately stood. I need to take this. Michael, I said, my voice small. He paused at the door. What? What appointment did you have? His face tightened. Nothing important. You missed the ambulance. I told you I had something scheduled. What could be scheduled that mattered more than this? For one brief second, I saw something flash across his face. Not guilt, not sorrow, fear. Then it vanished. You're emotional because you're sick, he said. Don't start making accusations. He left the room before I could answer. I turned my face toward the window. Outside, the sky over Columbus was turning gray, and the reflection in the glass showed me a woman I barely recognized. Pale, tired, frightened, with hospital wires trailing from her body like proof of how fragile life had become. That night, machines beeped softly beside me. Nurses came and went. Somewhere down the hall, a man coughed for nearly an hour. I lay awake replaying Michael's face when I asked about the appointment. That tiny flash of fear stayed with me. At the time, I thought maybe he was afraid of losing me and didn't know how to show it. I still wanted to believe that. Even then, even after the mug, even after the ambulance, even after he left me alone in a hospital bed to answer a phone call he did not want me to hear, I still wanted to believe my husband was simply a flawed man under stress. I did not yet understand that his coldness was not confusion, it was calculation. Hospitals have a way of making time feel both too fast and too slow. The monitors keep beeping, nurses keep walking in and out, doctors speak in careful words, and every hour seems to carry a new test, a new question, a new number someone is watching on a screen. Yet somehow, when you are the one lying in the bed waiting to know whether your body can be trusted again, the minutes stretch endlessly. I spent the next several days in that hospital room watching the door. I hate admitting that now, but it is the truth. Every time footsteps slowed in the hallway, I hoped it was Michael. Every time a shadow crossed the glass panel beside my door, I turned my head. I told myself he would come back with clean clothes, with my robe, with the little blue hairbrush from my bathroom drawer. I told myself he would look rested and ashamed and say, Sarah, I'm sorry. I was scared. But that man never came. The Michael who came was the one I had seen in the kitchen. Cold, impatient, half present. He arrived the morning after I was admitted, wearing khaki pants, a navy jacket, and the expression of a man running errands. He placed a plastic grocery bag on the chair beside my bed. I brought some things, he said. Inside were socks, an old sweater, I never wore toothpaste, and a paperback mystery novel I had already finished 2 years earlier. No robe, no phone charger, no reading glasses. Thank you, I said anyway, because politeness had become a reflex with me. He stood near the foot of the bed and looked at the monitor. What did they say? They're still running tests. How many tests do they need? I blinked at him. Michael. It was my heart. I know that. But the way he said it made it sound like a scheduling inconvenience. A nurse came in to check my vitals, a woman with soft brown hair tucked into a bun and a name badge that read Karen Whitman. She had been kind to me since the first night, adjusting my blanket without being asked, explaining medications, slowly treating me like a frightened person instead of a chart. How are we feeling this morning, Mrs. Garcia? She asked. Tired, I said. That's understandable, Michael interrupted. Do you know when she'll be released? Karen looked at him, then at me. That depends on what the cardiology team decides. But probably soon, sir. Your wife had a serious cardiac event. The priority is making sure she's stable. His mouth tightened. I felt embarrassed. That was another thing I hate admitting. I was the patient, the one in pain, and still I felt embarrassed that my husband was making the nurse uncomfortable. After Karen left, Michael checked his phone. You don't have to stay long, I said quietly, though I desperately wanted him to say he did. I can't. I have things to take care of. What things? He didn't answer right away. House things, he said. That became his phrase over the next few days. House things. Whenever I asked why he had to leave, it was house things. Whenever I asked if he could bring something from home, he forgot because of house things. Whenever Emily called and asked why Dad wasn't with me, I repeated what he had told me. He's handling things at the house. Emily did not sound convinced. Mom, I can fly in. No, honey, I said, staring at the pale hospital wall. Wait until we know more. The truth was, I did not want Emily to see how bad things felt. Not only my body, but my marriage. A mother can be lying in a hospital bed and still try to protect her child from worry. Maybe that is foolish, but it was all I knew. Michael's visits grew shorter. 15 minutes. 10. Once he came in, answered 2 text messages, asked if I had signed any discharge papers yet, and left before the lunch tray arrived. But the phone calls bothered me most. Every time his phone rang, he stepped into the hallway. Not sometimes. Every time. His voice would drop low and he would move far enough away that I could not hear him clearly. Through the open door, I could see only part of him, one shoulder, one hand moving as he spoke, his head turning sharply whenever someone walked past. One afternoon, I woke from a shallow sleep and heard him outside my room. "No, not now," he said. His voice was tense. I held still. "I told you she's still here." There was a pause. "I can't talk about that in the hospital." My heart began to beat faster, and the monitor beside me noticed before I could pretend otherwise. The beeping changed slightly. Michael stepped farther down the hall. I could not hear the rest. When he came back in, I asked, "Who was that?" He didn't look at me. "Insurance." "What insurance?" "Ours, Sarah. What other insurance would I be talking about?" His irritation made me retreat. I only asked, and I answered. He sat down, but only for a minute. Then he stood again. "I have to go." That evening, Karen came in with my medication. She moved around the room quietly, but I could tell she had something on her mind. "Your husband left?" she asked. "Yes," she nodded, checking the IV line. Then she said, "Do you have someone else who can be with you?" "A daughter, sister?" "Friend?" The question landed softly, but I felt the concern underneath it. "My daughter lives in Denver. Can she come?" she offered. Karen looked at me carefully. "Maybe let her." I swallowed. "Did something happen?" She hesitated. "Nurses are careful people. They know more than they say. They hear arguments through curtains, see bruises, people explain away, notice who holds a hand and who looks at a watch. I don't want to upset you," she said. "You already have." She pulled the rolling stool closer and lowered her voice. "I passed by earlier when your husband was on the phone." My chest tightened, not from illness this time. "What did you hear?" "Not everything." "But something." Karen looked toward the door, then back at me. He sounded like he was discussing money. "And he said—" She paused. "He said, she doesn't know about the other account." For a moment, I did not understand the sentence. The other account. The words seemed ordinary on their own. Other account. But together they opened a door in my mind I had not known was there. "What other account?" I whispered. Karen's face softened. "I don't know. I'm sorry." I debated whether to say anything. "No," I said quickly. "Thank you." She touched my arm gently. "Just make sure you have someone you trust helping you when you go home." Someone you trust. After she left, I lay very still. I thought of Michael collecting the mail before I could see it. Michael locking his phone. Michael leaving for Lake Erie with a fishing rod that never smelled like fish. Michael saying enough whenever I asked about our savings. I thought of his face when I asked what appointment mattered more than the ambulance. Fear. That flash of fear. Not grief, not panic, fear of being caught. Fear. I wanted to call Emily right then. I wanted to tell her everything, even the parts I did not understand. But what would I say? Your father may have another bank account. Your father may be hiding money. Your father may have left me alone in the hospital because something else mattered more. The words felt too ugly to hand to my daughter over the phone, so I did what I had done for years. I stayed quiet. But that night, my silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of a woman trying to keep peace. It was the silence of a woman listening carefully. The next morning, Michael returned with coffee for himself, and nothing for me. He sat in the chair scrolling through his phone while sunlight crept across the floor. "The doctor said I may go home tomorrow," I told him. "Good," he said without looking up. "Good." Not, "That's wonderful." Not, "I'm relieved." Just good. "Michael," I said. He sighed, still looking at his phone. "Why do we have another account?" His thumb stopped moving. The room seemed to still around us. Slowly, he raised his eyes. "What are you talking about our bank accounts? Savings, retirement, anything besides the joint account." His expression hardened in tiny stages like a door locking from the inside. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I want to know." "You're in the hospital, Sarah. This is not the time to start obsessing over money." "I'm not obsessing. You're sick. You're anxious. The doctors probably have you on medication that makes you confused." There it was. The shift. He did not answer the question. He questioned my mind. A few days earlier, that might have silenced me completely. But Karen's warning sat beside me like a witness. "I'm clear enough to ask," I said. His eyes sharpened. "We have what we need," he replied. "And I handle it." "That's not an answer." He stood so abruptly the chair scraped against the floor. "I'm not doing this here." Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and I saw his face change before he turned away. Softer, alert, almost eager. He stepped into the hallway. This time he did not close the door all the way. I heard only one sentence. "I told you not until she's discharged." My hands went cold beneath the blanket. Not until she's discharged. I did not know who was on the other end of that call. I did not know what account Karen had overheard him mention. I did not know why my husband seemed more worried about timing than about my heart. But for the first time in 38 years, I stopped asking myself whether I was being unfair to Michael. Instead, I asked myself a different question. What has he been doing while I was busy trusting him? I came home on a Sunday afternoon with a paper bag full of medications, a folder of discharge instructions, and a heart that no longer felt like something I could take for granted. Linda drove me home, not Michael. He said he had meant to come, but something with the car had come up. That was the phrase he used over the phone while I sat in the hospital lobby wearing the same shoes I had worn when the ambulance took me away. Something came up. Linda heard him say it. She did not comment, but her lips pressed together in that way people do when they are trying not to speak a hard truth too soon. The ride home was quiet. Columbus looked painfully normal through the passenger window. Families were leaving church. A man was walking a golden retriever along a sidewalk. Someone had set out a sprinkler, even though the sky looked like rain. Life was continuing with no awareness that mine had shifted under my feet. Linda pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. "Do you want me to come in with you?" she asked. I looked at the house. The blue shutters needed repainting. A small clay pot on the porch had tipped over in the wind, spilling dry soil across the steps. Michael had not bothered to fix it. "No," I said softly. "I'll be all right." Linda gave me a look that told me she did not believe that. "Sarah, call me if you need anything. I mean, anything." "I will." She helped me carry the medication bag inside. Michael was in the den watching television. He did not get up when we entered. The volume was low, but still loud enough to fill the silence he left between us. "You're back," he said. Linda stood in the doorway waiting. "Yes," I answered. "I'm back." Michael glanced at Linda. "Thanks for bringing her." Linda's voice was cool. "She shouldn't be lifting anything. The doctor said she needs rest." "I know that." "Good," Linda said. "Then make sure she gets it." For one brief moment, I saw Michael's face tighten. He did not like being corrected, especially not in his own house. After Linda left, I stood in the living room holding the discharge folder against my chest. I had imagined coming home would make me feel safe. Instead, the house felt unfamiliar, like a stage set built to resemble my life. Michael muted the television. "So what did they say exactly?" I lowered myself carefully into the armchair. "I have to take the medications every day. Follow up with the cardiologist, no heavy lifting, no stress." He gave a short laugh. "No stress. That must be nice." I stared at him. "Nice. You think I haven't been stressed? You were in the hospital for days, Sarah. Do you have any idea what that costs?" There it was. Not 5 minutes home, and he had already carried the conversation to money. "I almost died," I said. "I didn't say you didn't. You're talking about cost, because someone has to." His words landed like small stones. I wanted to tell him I was tired. I wanted to say I needed soup, a blanket, maybe just a hand on my shoulder. But I had already learned not to ask Michael for tenderness when he was determined to make himself the injured party. So I said nothing. The first 2 days at home were a blur of pills, naps, and careful steps from the bedroom to the bathroom. I moved like an older version of myself, one hand sliding along walls for support. Every sound startled me. Every flutter in my chest made me pause and listen to my own body like it was a stranger speaking in another room. Michael did not abuse me in any obvious way. That would have been easier to explain. He did not shout all day. He did not throw things. He did not forbid me from eating or sleeping. He simply withheld care in a way that made me feel ashamed for needing it. If I asked for water, he said, "In a minute," then forgot. If I asked whether he could pick up a prescription, he said, "You should have told me earlier." If I rested too long, he said, "The doctor didn't tell you to become helpless." That word hit me hard. Helpless. I had never been helpless. I had been the woman who kept extra batteries in the drawer, who remembered birthdays, who stretched leftovers into another meal, who sat up all night with Emily when she had a fever. I had carried so many things quietly that people mistook my silence for ease. But illness has a cruel way of showing you who is willing to carry you when you can no longer carry everything else. On the third morning, the mail came. I heard the truck before I saw it. The familiar squeal of brakes, the soft thump of envelopes dropping into the box near the front porch. Michael moved faster than I expected. "I'll get it," he called from the hallway. But this time he was too late. I was already near the front window, slowly watering the peace lily Linda had brought over. I watched him step outside, but before he reached the mailbox, a gust of wind lifted one envelope from the stack and sent it skidding across the porch. It landed against the leg of the small table by the door. Michael did not see it. He gathered the rest of the mail, sorted it right there by the box, and slipped 2 envelopes into the back pocket of his jeans before coming inside. My heartbeat changed. Not fast enough to frighten me medically, but enough to remind me I was alive and paying attention. What came, I asked. Nothing important. He tossed a grocery flyer and a utility notice onto the table. After he went back to the den, I waited. Then I opened the front door and picked up the envelope from the porch. It was from the hospital billing department. My name was printed clearly across the front. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down before opening it. My hands were still weak, and the paper trembled slightly as I unfolded it. The balance due made the room blur. It was thousands of dollars. More than I expected. More than Michael had ever prepared me for. More than I could imagine paying without help. I read the number 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood. There were insurance adjustments listed, but also charges and codes and words that felt deliberately confusing. I had worked in a clinic long enough to know bills could change, but in that moment, I was not an office assistant. I was a frightened woman in her own kitchen. Michael entered while I was still staring at it. His eyes went to the paper. "So it came," he said. I looked up slowly. "You knew I figured it would. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were supposed to be resting." There was no softness in the answer. I pushed the paper toward him. "Michael, this is a lot of money." He did not pick it up. "I know. What do we do?" He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Sarah. The insurance didn't cover enough, and the joint account is low." "The joint account is low." The sentence seemed to echo through the kitchen. "How low?" He looked away. "Low enough." "How low, Michael?" His jaw flexed. "This is exactly why I didn't want to discuss this right now." "No," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I need to know." He stepped closer to the table and tapped the hospital bill with 2 fingers. "You need to understand that choices have consequences." I stared at him. "Choices. You ignored your health for years. That is not fair. You ate what you wanted. You stressed over everything. You refused to exercise with me when I asked." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the cruelty was so polished it sounded rehearsed. "Michael, I had a cardiac event. The doctors said there were multiple factors, and now we have a bill." I said carefully, "We have a bill." His eyes hardened. "It's your illness, Sarah. You handle it." For a few seconds, I forgot to breathe. There are sentences that end a marriage long before any legal paper does. That was one of them. Your illness. You handle it. Not our life, not our problem, not my wife. Your illness. I looked down at the bill again, but I was no longer only seeing numbers. I was seeing 38 years of meals, cooked shirts, washed appointments, remembered sacrifices made. I was seeing myself trusting him with every bank statement, every savings plan, every retirement decision. I was seeing Michael sitting in hospital chairs asking about insurance before asking about pain. "What happened to our savings?" I asked. He moved away from the counter. "I told you things have been expensive." "What things? Property taxes, repairs, medical premiums, groceries. Do you want a list?" "Yes," I said. "Actually, I do." That surprised him. He stared at me as if I had spoken in a voice he did not recognize. "You're not well," he said. "I am well enough to ask where our money went." His face darkened. "Don't start acting like I've done something wrong because you got sick." The words struck harder than I expected. "Because you got sick." As though my body had betrayed him personally. As though the hospital bill was not just a debt, but a weapon he could place between us. He picked up the envelope and dropped it back on the table. "You'll need to call them and set up a payment plan. I don't even know what we can afford. Then figure it out." He turned and walked out of the kitchen. I remained at the table for a long time after he left. The house was quiet except for the television in the den and the faint hum of the refrigerator. The bill lay in front of me like a threat. For years I had believed fear was loud. I thought it came with slammed doors, shouted words, obvious danger. But that morning, I learned fear could also be quiet. It could sit across from you in a familiar kitchen. It could wear your husband's face. It could slide a bill across the table and tell you that your suffering belonged to you alone. I folded the hospital bill slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I reached for the small notebook I kept near the phone, the one where I usually wrote grocery lists and reminders. At the top of a clean page, I wrote hospital bill, joint account, other account. Then I underlined the last 2 words. I did not know yet what I would find. I did not know how deep Michael's lie went. But for the first time since the ambulance took me away, my hands stopped trembling. Because pain had made me weak. But his cruelty had made me awake. The first thing I did was wait. That may sound strange. When you suspect your husband has been lying to you, every nerve in your body wants to run toward the truth, throw open drawers, demand passwords, shout until the walls confess what they have seen. But I had lived with Michael long enough to know that direct questions only made him close ranks. He was not a man who explained himself when cornered. He attacked. So I waited. I took my pills. I drank water. I rested when my body forced me to. I let Michael believe his words had pushed me back into silence. When he passed through the kitchen, I lowered my eyes. When he asked if I had called the hospital about a payment plan, I said, not yet. When he complained about the cost of my prescriptions, I apologized quietly. But inside, something had changed. Every apology tasted like strategy. The notebook stayed hidden under the cushion of the armchair in the bedroom. Each time Michael went outside or took a call in the den, I pulled it out and wrote down what I remembered. Mail before breakfast, phone locked, Lake Erie trips, other account, hospital bill, joint account low, lakeside. At first, I wrote lakeside with a question mark because I didn't know why the word came to me. Maybe from his fishing trips, maybe from something I had glimpsed once on a receipt, maybe from that soft voice in the back of a wife's mind that collects details long before she understands them. On Wednesday afternoon, Michael left for the grocery store. He almost never went grocery shopping. For 38 years, groceries had been my job. But since I was still recovering, he announced he would handle it as though buying milk and bread made him a saint. The moment his car backed out of the driveway, I moved. Slowly, because my body still punished me for rushing. I sat at the small desk in the guest room, opened the laptop, and stared at the screen like it might judge me for what I was about to do. For years, I had not logged into our main bank account without Michael sitting beside me. He said it was easier if he handled it, easier for whom I now wondered. I typed in the bank website. My fingers were stiff. The password had been saved, thank God, because I could not remember the current one. Michael changed passwords often and told me it was for security. The account opened. For a moment, I simply stared at the balance. Then I leaned closer. That couldn't be right. I refreshed the page. The number stayed the same. Our joint savings account, the one I believed held the careful remains of decades of work, discipline, sacrifice, and planning, was nearly empty. Not completely empty. That would have been too obvious. There was just enough left to make it seem like an account still existed. A thin little balance sitting there like a curtain over a missing room. My hands began to shake. I clicked into the transaction history. At first, the lines blurred together. Transfers, withdrawals, payments, electronic drafts. I took a breath the way the hospital nurse had taught me, slow and slower out. Then I began reading one line at a time. The pattern was not dramatic. That was what made it terrifying. Michael had not drained the account in one wild act. He had bled it slowly. $800 here, $1,200 there, $3,000 marked as home repair, $1,700 marked insurance adjustment, $2,500 marked consulting. Some transfers went to credit cards I recognized. Others went to accounts with partial numbers only. Several were marked simply as external transfer. Then I saw it. Lakeside Reserve. The words sat in the description column beside a transfer of $4,800. I stopped breathing. There it was again. Not a memory, not a suspicion. A name. I clicked backward through the months. Lakeside Reserve appeared again. $2,000, $3,600, $1,250, $5,000. Always spaced out, never on the same day each month. As if Michael had been careful not to create a pattern even a trusting wife might notice. I reached for my notebook and wrote each amount down. My handwriting looked different from usual. Smaller, tighter, like each number had to be trapped before it escaped. I went back 1 year, then 2. The transfers continued. Not every month, but often enough to make my stomach twist. Money I thought was resting safely for our retirement had been moving somewhere else while I was cooking dinners, mailing birthday cards, and asking Michael if we should cut back on cable. He had told me we were fine. He had told me not to worry. He had told me he handled it. The front door opened. I nearly dropped the pen. Michael's voice came from the hallway. Sarah. I closed the banking page so fast my chest twinged. For a second, fear froze me in the chair. Then I remembered to breathe. In the guest room, I called. He appeared in the doorway carrying 2 plastic grocery bags. His eyes went immediately to the laptop. What are you doing? Checking email, I said. His gaze stayed on the screen. You should be resting. I am sitting down. That's not the same thing. He stepped into the room and placed the bags on the floor instead of taking them to the kitchen. His attention was still fixed on the laptop, and I could feel the old Sarah inside me wanting to explain to soothe to make him comfortable. I did not let her speak. Michael moved closer. You didn't go into anything financial, did you? The question came too quickly. I looked up at him. Why? Because you don't need to stress yourself with bills right now. Bills. He always wrapped control in concern. I was just checking messages, I said. He studied me for a long second. Then his face relaxed, but not fully. Good. Leave the financial mess to me. The financial mess. I wondered if he realized what he had admitted. After he left the room, I waited until I heard him unpacking groceries in the kitchen. Then I quietly tore the page of notes from my notebook, folded it twice, and slipped it into the pocket of my robe. That night, I barely slept. Michael did. He snored softly beside me as though nothing in the world troubled him. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of a man who had told me to handle my own hospital bill while thousands of dollars had gone somewhere called Lakeside Reserve. By morning, I knew I needed more than numbers in a notebook. I needed paper. Proof. Michael had always said paper mattered. In insurance, in banks, in courts, in life. Paper told the official version of a thing. So, after breakfast when he went into the garage for one of his private phone calls, I returned to the laptop and printed 3 months of statements. The printer was in the hallway closet, old and noisy. Each page came out with a mechanical whine that sounded to me as loud as a siren. I stood beside it, my heart thudding, praying Michael would not come back inside. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. I grabbed them warm from the tray and tucked them inside an old recipe binder marked Holiday Meals. Michael had never opened that binder in his life. Over the next 2 days, I built my little archive. Not dramatically, not all at once. 5 pages here, a screenshot there, a date written down after Michael left the room. I printed only when the garage door was closed or the shower was running. I hid everything in places Michael considered mine and therefore unimportant: recipe books, sewing boxes, a tin of old greeting cards, the bottom drawer beneath folded tablecloths. With every page, the story grew darker. There were cash withdrawals before nearly every Lake Erie weekend. There were payments at restaurants in Cleveland when Michael had told me he was eating sandwiches with fishing buddies. There was a charge at a boutique hotel. 2 nights. Lakeview. I sat on the edge of the guest bed holding that statement and felt something inside me cave in. A woman knows before she knows. I had not seen her face yet. I did not know her name. But the shape of her was already there in the spaces Michael had carved out of our life. She was in the phone calls he took outside. She was in the mail he hid. She was in the money missing from our savings. And somehow even then, the affair was not what hurt most. It was the hospital bill. It was the fact that he had looked at me weak, frightened, and recovering and saw an opportunity. Not a wife to protect, an obstacle to weaken. That afternoon, I asked him again. I waited until he was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee. I placed my medication schedule beside me, partly because I needed it, partly because I wanted to remind myself that my body had survived worse than this conversation. Michael, I said, I need to know how much is left in our joint savings. He didn't look up from his newspaper. Not this again. Yes, this again. He folded the paper slowly. I told you it's low. How low, Sarah? How low? His face hardened. A few thousand. I felt the room tilt through, this time not from illness. We had more than that. Expenses happened. What expenses? He threw the newspaper onto the table. The roof needed work. Property taxes went up. Insurance premiums went up. The market shifted. Do you want me to make money appear out of thin air? Show me. That stopped him. What? Show me the records. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he smiled. Not kindly. You don't understand half of what you're asking for. Then explain it. His smile vanished. I am not going to sit here and be interrogated in my own house because you're anxious after a hospital stay. My hospital stay did not empty our savings. The words left my mouth before I could soften them. Michael stood. His chair scraped the tile. You need to be very careful, he said. It was not loud. That made it worse. I looked at him, this man I had slept beside for 38 years, and saw clearly what I had only sensed before. He was not angry because I was wrong. He was angry because I was close, careful about what I asked, about making accusations you can't take back. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving his coffee untouched. I sat there until my pulse settled. Then I opened my notebook and added a new line beneath Lakeside Reserve. Michael is afraid of records. That night, after he went to bed, I took the printed statements from the recipe binder and spread them across the kitchen table. I arranged them by date. I circled every transfer I did not understand. I wrote totals on a separate page. By the time the clock on the stove read 1:17 a.m., I had added enough to know one thing with certainty. Our money had not disappeared. It had been moved, and Michael knew exactly where it had gone. The envelope came on a Friday morning, 3 days after I discovered the transfers to Lakeside Reserve. I remember that day clearly because Michael had left early. He told me he was going to the hardware store, but he dressed too nicely for lumber and screws. He wore his gray button-down shirt, the one he usually saved for dinners out, and he shaved twice over the same spot on his jaw while I watched from the bathroom doorway. You're dressed up for a hardware store, I said. He glanced at me in the mirror. I have other errands. What kind of errands? His hand stopped near the faucet. Sarah, Do I need to report every stop I make now? A week earlier, I would have apologized. That morning, I only said no. He looked at me through the mirror as if trying to decide whether my quietness was weakness or warning. Don't overdo it today, he said. You've been acting strange. Acting strange. That was what he called a wife beginning to notice. After he left, I stood at the front window and watched his car disappear down the street. Then I waited for the mail truck. By then, I had begun paying attention to everything. The hour the mail arrived, which shoes Michael wore when he said he was going fishing, how long he stayed in the garage for private calls, which jacket pockets he checked before leaving the house. I had become a woman living inside her own home like an investigator walking through a crime scene. At 11:18 a.m., the mail truck stopped in front of our house. I moved as quickly as my body allowed. My recovery had become its own kind of clock. Too fast and my chest warned me. Too much bending and dizziness rose behind my eyes. But that day, fear pushed me forward. I reached the mailbox before Michael could possibly return. There were 4 envelopes, a grocery coupon, a water bill, a glossy advertisement for replacement windows, and 1 envelope from a bank I did not recognize. North Harbor Credit Union. The envelope was addressed to Michael Garcia. But beneath his name in smaller print was another name. Denise Walker. My fingers went cold. For a long moment I stood there beside the mailbox, the summer air warm on my face, staring at those 2 names together as if they had been written in another language. Michael Garcia. Denise Walker. I had never heard him mention a Denise Walker. Not from work, not from church, not from the neighborhood, not from old friends. And yet her name sat beside his on an envelope from a credit union I had never known existed. I brought the mail inside and placed everything on the kitchen table. Then I sat down. The envelope lay in front of me, white and ordinary, holding the power to change the rest of my life. For several minutes, I did not touch it. There are rules we are raised with, especially women like me. Don't snoop. Don't open someone else's mail. Don't make accusations. Don't create trouble unless you are certain. Be fair. Be patient. Be the bigger person. But I had been fair. I had been patient. I had been the bigger person until I was nearly small enough to disappear. Michael had opened our financial life without me. He had moved money I helped save. He had hidden records, lied about accounts, and used my hospital bill like a leash around my neck. So I opened the envelope. My hands shook as I slid 1 finger under the flap. The paper tore unevenly, too loud in the quiet kitchen. I unfolded the statement inside. At first, all I saw were numbers. Then 1 number rose from the page like a scream. Balance $247,892.16. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Nearly $248,000. The man who told me our joint account was almost empty had almost $250,000 hidden somewhere else. The man who told me my illness was mine to handle had enough money to pay the hospital bill many times over. The man who watched me sit at the kitchen table, pale and shaking, had let me believe we were ruined. I pressed a hand over my mouth, not to cry, to keep from making a sound. The account listed 2 names, Michael Garcia and Denise Walker. Joint owners. I read the phrase again and again. Joint owners. For 38 years, I had been Michael's wife. I had shared his home, his meals, his family, his burdens. But somewhere, quietly, legally, financially, he had built another partnership with a woman whose name I had never heard. I turned the page. The statement showed deposits and transfers. Some were large, some were small. Many came from an external account ending in the same 4 digits as our joint savings. My breath caught. There it was in ink. Money had moved from our account to theirs. Not once. Not by mistake. Again and again. I found 1 transfer for $5,000 dated 2 weeks before my hospital stay. Another for $3,200 the month before. Another for $7,500 labeled Reserve Funding. Reserve. Lakeside Reserve. The name I had seen in our bank statement was not a random business. It was connected to this. To them. My mind began assembling pieces faster than my heart could bear. Lake Erie weekends, Cleveland restaurant charges, boutique hotel, phone calls in the garage, the other account, Denise Walker. I got up slowly and locked the front door. It was a strange thing to do. Michael had a key. Locking the door would not keep him out. But in that moment, I needed to feel that some boundary in my life still existed. Then I took the statement to the guest room, placed it beside my printed bank records, and began copying everything into my notebook. North Harbor Credit Union. Michael Garcia. Denise Walker. Balance $247,892.16. Transfers from joint savings. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I remembered the copier function on the printer. The machine made its usual grinding sound as I copied each page. I kept stopping to listen for Michael's car. Each time a vehicle passed outside, my body tensed. I imagined him walking in, seeing the envelope open, snatching the pages from my hand, telling me I was confused, unstable, sick. But he did not come. Not yet. Not. I made 2 copies. One went inside the recipe binder with the bank statements. Another went into an old shoebox beneath sewing patterns in the closet. The original envelope I placed back on the table exactly where mail would normally be. But I could not make the torn flap look untouched. That frightened me. I stood over it thinking. Then I did something I had not done in years. I lied in advance. I took a pair of scissors and carefully cut the envelope open across the top, making it look like I had opened it neatly, not desperately. Then I placed the statement back inside. When Michael came home at 2:40 p.m., he was carrying no hardware store bag, no screws, no paint, no receipt, only his phone and the smell of unfamiliar cologne. I was in the living room with a blanket over my lap, pretending to read. He entered the kitchen. I heard the mail shift, then silence. Long silence. "Sarah." His voice was flat. I lowered the book. "Yes." He appeared in the living room doorway holding the envelope. "Did you open this?" My pulse jumped, but I kept my face calm. "It was in the mail." "That's not what I asked." "I opened the mail." "You opened my mail." I looked at the envelope in his hand. It had our last name on it. His eyes sharpened. It had my name on it, and Denise Walker's. The room changed. I had said the name aloud. For the first time, her name existed between us. Michael did not move. His face went still in a way that told me more than anger would have. "Who is Denise Walker?" I asked. He looked down at the envelope, then back at me. "No one. No one with a bank account. It's not what you think." That sentence almost made me laugh. Not what you think. A sentence people use when the truth is exactly what you think, but they need a few seconds to build a smaller lie. "What is North Harbor Credit Union?" I asked. His voice lowered. "You had no right. I had no right to know where our money went. That account has nothing to do with you." The words came too fast, too sharp. I set the book down. "Then why does it have money from our joint savings?" His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I came home from the hospital, Michael had no immediate answer. And the silence was the most honest thing he had given me in years. Finally, he said, "You're misunderstanding financial documents you don't know how to read." There it was again. The old trick. Make Sarah small, make Sarah confused, make Sarah doubt her eyes. But this time I had copies hidden in 3 different places. "I can read a balance," I said. "I can read names, and I can read transfers." His face darkened. "You need to drop this." "No." The word came out quietly, but it was solid. Michael stared at me as if he had never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe for 38 years he had only seen the woman who made dinner, folded towels, signed where he pointed, and trusted where he insisted. But the woman sitting in that chair was not that Sarah anymore. She had survived the hospital. She had seen the account. She had read the name. And she was finally beginning to understand that the man who left her with a hospital bill had not simply lied about money. He had built an entire second life with it. After I said Denise Walker's name, Michael did not speak for almost 10 seconds. In a marriage, 10 seconds can feel like a lifetime. I watched his face the way I had watched monitors in the hospital. Every tiny change mattered. His jaw tightened. His eyes shifted toward the front door, then back to me. His hand squeezed the envelope so hard the paper bent at the corners. That was how I knew. Denise Walker was not no one. She was the reason his phone had become private. She was the reason Lake Erie had become his second home. She was the reason money had vanished from our savings while I was being told to worry less and trust more. Finally, Michael said, "You're making this into something ugly." I almost smiled. "Michael," I said quietly, "you made it ugly. I'm only reading what came in the mail." He stepped closer. "That account is complicated." "Then explain it. It's tied to an investment." "With Denise Walker, she knows real estate." My heart gave one hard beat. Real estate. That was new. I held his gaze, refusing to rescue him from the silence. "What kind of real estate?" He looked irritated, but underneath it, I saw panic building. "A property opportunity near the lake," he said. "The lake where you go fishing?" He hated that question. I could see it. It was supposed to benefit both of us. "Both of us," I repeated. "Then why didn't I know about it?" "Because you get nervous about money." "No. I ask questions about money. You call it nervous because you don't want to answer." His face flushed. "You're not thinking clearly." That line again. I wondered how many times he had used my age, my illness, my trust, my softness as walls around his secrets. I did not argue further. I knew now that Michael would only give me pieces, and each piece would be shaped to protect himself. So I let the conversation end there. I let him take the original statement. I let him believe he had regained control because the envelope was in his hand. What he did not know was that I had copies. And copies made me brave. That evening after Michael went to the garage, I took out my notebook and wrote down the words he had accidentally given me. Denise Walker. Real estate. Property near lake. Lakeside Reserve. Then I did what I had avoided for days. I searched her name. At first my hands shook so badly I typed it wrong twice. Denise Walker. Finally I found her. Denise Walker, 57 years old, Cleveland area. Former real estate agent. Community volunteer. Widow. There were pictures. That was the part that hurt in a way I had not expected. Until then, Denise has been a name on paper, a shadow, a theory. But suddenly she had a face. Honey blonde hair cut just above her shoulders. Bright lipstick, smooth smile. A woman who looked directly into the camera as if life had always opened doors for her. I clicked through a local charity page from the previous spring. There she was standing beside a group of donors at a lakeside fundraiser. And there was Michael. My Michael. Not in fishing clothes, not with a cooler, not with the tired face he wore at home. He was wearing a dark blazer I had not seen in years, smiling like a younger man. His hand rested lightly at Denise's lower back. I stared at that photo for so long the screen dimmed. I moved the cursor and woke it again. There were other photos. Not many, but enough. Michael standing near Denise at a wine-tasting event. Michael seated 2 chairs away from her at a real estate luncheon. Michael in the background of a ribbon-cutting photo for a small lakeside development. Lakeside Reserve. My mouth went dry. It was not only an account, it was a project, a place, a future. The next search made my stomach turn. Lakeside Reserve cottages. A website appeared with glossy images of small luxury homes near Lake Erie. Blue water, white railings, fire pits, couples wrapped in blankets watching sunsets. The kind of retirement dream Michael and I had once talked about in vague, impossible ways when we were younger. Only now he was building it without me. I clicked on available properties. Several were marked sold, one was marked pending. Lot 14. A 2-bedroom cottage with lake access, a screened porch, and enough windows to make every morning look like a postcard. I do not know how I knew, but I knew. That one was theirs. The next afternoon I called North Harbor Credit Union from the number printed on the copied statement. I did not expect them to tell me much. They couldn't, of course. My name was not on the account. The woman on the phone was polite and firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't discuss an account unless you're listed as an owner." "I understand," I said, but before hanging up, I asked one question. "Can you tell me if North Harbor Credit Union works with Lakeside Reserve property financing?" There was a brief pause. "We do have mortgage and escrow services connected to several regional developments," she said carefully. She would not say more. She did not have to. I thanked her and hung up. That night, Michael said he was tired and went to bed early. I waited until his breathing deepened, then went into the laundry room where he kept a small basket of receipts, keys, and loose change. It was a place I had cleaned around for years without really looking. This time, I looked. Under a stack of gas receipts and an old tire warranty, I found a folded brochure. Lakeside Reserve. My fingers tightened around it. Inside was a printed map of the development. A red circle had been drawn around Lot 14. Beside it in handwriting that was not Michael's, someone had written "perfect for us." I sat on the laundry room floor holding that brochure, and for the first time, I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears sliding down my face while the washing machine hummed beside me. Perfect for us. How many times had I made coffee for him while he was dreaming of that porch with someone else? How many times had I folded his shirts while Denise wrote notes on brochures? How many times had I worried about saving money on groceries while Michael moved thousands into a secret account for a lake house? The affair hurt. But the planning hurt more. An affair can be explained as weakness, selfishness, temptation. Still terrible but human. This was architecture. Michael had designed a life where I was removed quietly, financially weakened, and left behind with bills while he stepped into a lakeside cottage with Denise Walker. And suddenly the hospital bill made perfect sense. If I was scared enough, poor enough, ashamed enough, maybe I would not question the missing money. Maybe I would sign whatever he put in front of me. Maybe I would believe I was the burden and he was the victim. The next morning, I looked at Michael across the breakfast table differently. He was buttering toast. Such a normal thing. Such an ordinary motion. The same man who had hidden nearly $250,000 was spreading butter to the corners of his bread like nothing in the world had changed. "Are you going to Lake Erie this weekend?" I asked. His knife paused. "Maybe." "With the guys?" He looked up. "Yes." I nodded slowly. "Which guys?" His eyes narrowed. "You don't know them." "I might." "You don't." I took a sip of tea, though my throat was tight. Does Denise fish? The color drained from his face, only for a second. Then he recovered. Don't start. I asked a question. You're becoming obsessed. No, Michael, I'm becoming informed. His chair pushed back slightly, but he did not stand. You need to let this go. Why? Because you don't know what you're dealing with. That sentence should have frightened me. Instead, it clarified everything. I was not dealing with a misunderstanding. I was not dealing with a harmless investment. I was not dealing with a husband who made a mistake. I was dealing with a man who believed I had already lost before I even knew there was a fight. After breakfast, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and called Emily. When she answered, her voice was sleepy. It was early in Denver. Mom, are you okay? I looked at myself in the mirror. Pale face, tired eyes, a woman recovering from a heart event and waking up to a second life hidden inside her own marriage. I'm okay, I said. But I need you to listen carefully. What happened? I almost told her everything. Denise, the account, the lake house, the missing money. But then I remembered Michael's warning. You don't know what you're dealing with. And I realized I needed more proof before I pulled Emily into the storm. So I said, your father hasn't been honest about some financial things. There was silence. Then Emily said I knew something was wrong. Those 5 words broke my heart. What do you mean? He called me while you were in the hospital, she said. He told me not to fly in. He said you were exaggerating and that I'd only make things worse. I closed my eyes. He said that, yes, and Mom, he asked if I thought you'd ever consider selling the house. The air seemed to leave the bathroom. Selling the house. There it was. Not just money. Not just Denise. Not just a cottage by the lake. Michael was already reaching for the one thing I had left that he could still turn into cash. I gripped the edge of the sink. Emily, I said, my voice shaking but clear, I need you to save every message your father sends you. Mom, you're scaring me. I know. I'm scared too. And for the first time since this began, I told someone the truth. Not all of it, but enough. I think your father is trying to take more than money from me. After I spoke to Emily, I stopped pretending the danger was only emotional. For days, I had been grieving the betrayal as a wife. Denise Walker, the secret account, the lake cottage, the photographs of Michael smiling with a woman who had written perfect for us beside a property map. But Emily's words changed the shape of everything. He asked if I thought you'd ever consider selling the house. That was not romance. That was a plan. Our house had always meant more to me than walls and a roof. My father helped me buy it before Michael and I were married, back when I was still young enough to believe hard work protected you from heartbreak. I had painted the kitchen yellow the year Emily started kindergarten. I had planted rose bushes after my mother died. I had sat on the porch through every season of marriage, watching snow, rain, summer storms, and falling leaves. That house had held my life. And now I understood Michael had begun looking at it the way he looked at the hospital bill, not as part of our shared history, but as leverage. For the rest of that day, I moved carefully through the house, listening more than speaking. Michael watched me too. I felt it. His eyes followed me when I crossed the hallway. He asked twice who I had been talking to on the phone. I told him it was Emily, and he frowned like even our daughter had become an inconvenience. What did you tell her? He asked. That I'm recovering. What else? I looked at him. Should there be something else? His mouth tightened. No. I just don't want you worrying her. The hypocrisy nearly made me dizzy. This was the same man who had called Emily while I was in the hospital and told her not to come. The same man who had described my fear as exaggeration. The same man who even now was more concerned with controlling the story than telling the truth. That evening, Michael went into the garage after dinner. He said he was checking the air pressure in the tires. It was raining. Not hard, just a soft, steady rain tapping against the kitchen windows. No reasonable man checks tire pressure in the rain unless tires are not the real reason he is outside. I stood at the sink, rinsing a mug, watching his reflection in the dark window as he crossed the driveway. He closed the garage door behind him, but not completely. It stopped a few inches above the ground, leaving a thin strip of yellow light across the wet concrete. My phone was on the counter. I stared at it. Then I wiped my hands on a dish towel, picked it up, and opened the voice recorder app. My heart began to pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. The doctor had warned me about stress. Avoid emotional strain, he had said. Rest. Heal. Give your body time. But how does a woman rest while her life is being stolen one document at a time? I pressed record. Then I slid the phone into the pocket of my cardigan and walked slowly toward the laundry room, which shared a wall with the garage. There was an old heating vent near the floor. In winter, it let cold air through. That night, it let voices through. At first, I heard only Michael's muffled tone. Then, a woman's voice. Denise. I knew without proof. Some things the heart recognizes before the mind confirms them. No, listen to me, Michael said. She opened one statement. That's all. I held my breath. Denise's voice rose sharp but still muffled. One statement is enough if she starts asking questions. She doesn't understand this stuff. The casual cruelty of that sentence should not have surprised me. But it did. Somehow, even after everything, hearing him dismiss me so easily made my chest ache. She understands names and balances, Denise snapped. Michael lowered his voice, but the vent carried enough. I'll handle Sarah. My blood went cold. Handle Sarah. Not speak to my wife. Not make things right. Not confess. Handle. Denise said something I couldn't make out. Then Michael answered more clearly. No, she won't hire anybody. She doesn't have the money. That's why the hospital bill helps us. The room tilted. I reached for the washing machine to steady myself. The hospital bill helps us? My phone continued recording in my pocket. Michael went on. If she thinks the bill is bigger than it is, she'll panic. She always panics about debt. I can get her to agree to refinancing. Denise said, You said the house was protected. It's complicated, Michael replied. But if she signs, it gets easier. My hand flew to my mouth. Refinancing, selling the house, the hidden money, it was all connected. Denise's voice came through again. And if she doesn't sign... Michael paused. I could picture him in the garage, pacing between the old lawnmower and the storage shelves, one hand pressed to his forehead, like a man burdened by a problem. Not by guilt, by inconvenience. She will, he said. She's weak right now. She's scared. She doesn't want Emily involved. I just need to keep pressure on her. Weak right now. Scared. Pressure. Each word landed like a hand around my throat. Then came the sentence that changed everything. If she's buried under that hospital bill, she won't have the energy or money to fight me. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth, clean and ugly. Michael had not simply abandoned me during my illness. He had used it. He had seen my hospital stay as a window, my weakness as opportunity, my fear as a tool. Denise said something softer than almost coaxing. I caught only pieces. Lot 14. Closing. Before she changes. Michael answered, I know. I want this finished too. I'm tired of living like this. Living like this. Living with me, he meant. Living in the house I had built my life around. Living beside the woman who had packed his lunches, washed his clothes, raised his child, and trusted him with every dollar. Denise said. And after Michael's voice softened. After it's just us. I thought betrayal would make me scream. It did not. It made me silent. So silent I could hear the rain. So silent I could hear my own breath shaking. So silent I could hear the soft click as the recorder on my phone kept counting seconds. When the call ended, I moved away from the vent as carefully as I could. My knees felt weak, but not like they had in the kitchen before the hospital. This was not illness. This was shock hardening into purpose. I went back to the kitchen, stopped the recording, and saved it. The file name appeared automatically with the date and time. I renamed it Garage Call Michael Denise. Then I sent it to Emily. My thumb hovered over the button for several seconds before I pressed send. There are moments when sending one message feels like opening a door you can never close again. Emily called less than 1 minute later. I answered in a whisper from the bathroom. Mom, she said. Her voice was trembling. What was that? The truth. He said the hospital bill helps him. I know. He said you wouldn't have money to fight him. I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Emily said, I'm coming. This time I did not tell her no. Don't tell your father, I said. I won't. And save everything. The recording, his messages, anything he says. Mom, you need a lawyer. I know. Saying those words out loud made the situation feel both terrifying and real. After we hung up, I stayed in the bathroom sitting on the closed toilet lid with my phone in both hands. Through the wall, I heard the garage door open and close. Michael came back inside, shaking rain from his jacket. Sarah, he called. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes were red. But there was something new in them, something I had not seen in years. Resolve. In here, I answered, flushing the toilet so he would think that was why I had been behind the locked door. When I came out, Michael was standing in the hallway. Who were you talking to? No one. His eyes narrowed. For the first time, I understood how he had lived all those years hiding, measuring, calculating. The difference was, I was not hiding a betrayal. I was protecting myself from one. That night, I barely slept. Michael did not know Emily was coming. He did not know I had the recording. He did not know I had copies of the North Harbor Statement, the Lakeside Reserve brochure, and months of transfers hidden around the house. He still believed I was weak. He still believed fear would keep me obedient. But lying there in the dark beside him, listening to his breathing, I realized something that felt almost holy in its quietness. I did not need to shout to become strong. I only needed to stop surrendering the truth. By morning, I had made a decision. I would not confront him again without protection. I would not sign anything. I would not let him turn my illness into his escape route. And I would find someone who understood the law better than Michael understood lies. The next morning, I woke before Michael. For a few minutes, I lay perfectly still, listening to the quiet house. The rain had stopped sometime during the night. Pale light pressed through the curtains, soft and gray, the kind of morning that used to make me want to stay in bed with coffee and a book. But peace was no longer something I could trust just because a room was quiet. Michael slept on his side, facing away from me. His breathing was deep and steady. Looking at him from behind, he seemed harmless. Just an aging man with silver hair, one hand tucked beneath the pillow, his shoulders rising and falling under the blanket. That was the cruel thing about betrayal. It often slept beside you, looking ordinary. I slipped out of bed, slowly, careful not to wake him. My chest felt tight, but not in the frightening way it had before the hospital. This was nerves, fear, determination pressing against each other. In the bathroom, I locked the door and turned on the faucet to cover any sound. Then I opened my phone. Emily had sent 3 messages during the night. Mom, I saved the recording. I booked a flight. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. Please don't tell Dad. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. For days, I had felt like I was standing alone in a dark room, holding scraps of paper, while Michael moved around me with all the confidence of a man who believed no one would help me. But Emily was coming. My daughter had heard his voice, his real voice, not the father voice, not the husband voice, the planning voice. And now I needed someone who knew how to turn truth into protection. I remembered Helen Brooks because of my older sister, Teresa. Teresa had passed away 6 years earlier, but before that, she had gone through a difficult divorce from a man who was charming in public and cruel in private. Helen had been her lawyer. More than that, Helen had been the first person who believed my sister without asking her to prove pain politely. I still had Helen's number written in an old address book in the kitchen drawer. Michael always made fun of that drawer. Sarah keeps the entire 1980s in there, he used to say, laughing as if my habit of saving things was quaint. That morning, the drawer became a lifeline. I waited until Michael got up and went to the den with his coffee. Then I stood at the counter pretending to sort coupons while my fingers searched beneath old takeout menus, birthday candles, rubber bands, and church directories. There it was, a small blue address book with cracked corners, Brooks Helen Attorney. I copied the number into my phone and waited until Michael went outside to move the trash bins. Then I called. The phone rang 4 times. Brooks' legal office, a woman said. My voice nearly failed me. Hello. My name is Sarah Garcia. I'm looking for Helen Brooks. 1 moment, please. Soft hold music began playing. I stared through the kitchen window at Michael near the curb, dragging the trash bin as if he were just a normal husband doing a normal chore. Then a familiar older voice came on the line. This is Helen. I gripped the phone tighter. Helen, this is Sarah Garcia, Teresa Martinez's sister. There was a small pause, then warmth entered her voice. Sarah, of course. How are you? It was such a simple question, I almost broke under it. I need help, I whispered. Her voice changed immediately, not alarmed but focused. Are you safe right now? I looked at Michael through the window. I think so. Can you talk? Not for long. Then listen carefully. Do not confront him if you believe he is hiding money or pressuring you to sign anything. Do not sign any document. Do not give him original papers. And if you can come to my office today. My knees weakened with relief. I have records, I said. Bank statements, a hospital bill, a secret account, a recording. Bring copies. Not originals if he can access them. I have copies hidden. Good. Can someone drive you? Maybe my neighbor. Call her. And Sarah. Yes, if your husband has already started moving marital funds or pressuring you over the house time matters. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen holding the phone. For the first time, I had instructions, not vague courage, not emotional anger. Steps. Do not confront. Do not sign. Bring copies. Time matters. I called Linda next. She answered on the second ring. Sarah, can you drive me somewhere today? Where I glanced toward the den. Michael's television was on. A lawyer's office. Linda was silent for half a breath. Then she said, I'll be ready in 20 minutes. I almost cried again, but this time the tears came from gratitude. Getting the documents out of the house felt like smuggling pieces of my own life past a guard. I moved slowly from hiding place to hiding place. Recipe binder, sewing box, the shoebox beneath patterns, the old greeting card tin. Every paper seemed louder than paper should be. I placed everything in a plain canvas tote bag and covered it with a folded sweater. Then I added my medication bottle on top in case Michael asked why I was carrying a bag. He did. I was standing near the front door when he appeared from the den. "Where are you going?" I had prepared for this. Still, my mouth went dry. "Linda is taking me to pick up a prescription and maybe get some soup. I can get soup." "You forgot my prescription last time." His face hardened. "I said I was busy." "I know, that's why Linda offered." He looked at the tote bag. "What's in there?" "My sweater. Medication list." He stepped closer, and for one terrible second, I thought he might reach for it. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down. That phone saved me. His attention shifted, and I saw the familiar calculation in his face. Denise, I thought. Or someone connected to Denise. Someone more important than stopping his recovering wife from leaving with a canvas bag. "Fine," he said. "Don't be long." I opened the door before he could change his mind. Linda's car was already waiting at the curb. When I sat down beside her, she looked at my face, then at the tote bag. "Buckle up," she said, "and breathe." Helen Brooks's office was in an old brick building downtown above a small accounting firm and a florist. There was no shiny lobby, no intimidating glass walls, no receptionist with a headset. Just a narrow staircase, framed certificates, and the smell of coffee. Helen met us herself. She was in her early 70s with short white hair, sharp eyes, and a navy cardigan over a cream blouse. She looked like someone's grandmother until she shook your hand. Then she looked like someone who could take apart a lie with tweezers. "Sarah," she said gently. "Come in." Linda squeezed my shoulder. "I'll wait out here." But Helen looked at her and said, "If Sarah wants you in the room, you can stay." I did. There are times when you need a witness, not because you cannot speak, but because you are afraid your own story will sound unbelievable once it leaves your mouth. In Helen's office, I laid everything on the table. The hospital bill, the joint account statements, the transfers to Lakeside Reserve, the North Harbor Credit Union copy, the brochure with Lot 14 circled, the recording on my phone. Helen did not interrupt while I explained. She listened the way good lawyers and good doctors do, without wasting sympathy, but without withholding it either. When I played the garage recording, she sat back slowly. Michael's voice filled the office. "If she's buried under that hospital bill, she won't have the energy or money to fight me." Linda made a small sound beside me. Helen's face did not change much, but her eyes sharpened. When the recording ended, the room was quiet. Finally, Helen said, "Sarah, I'm very glad you came today." My hands twisted in my lap. "Is it bad?" "It is serious." Serious felt better than crazy. Serious meant real. Serious meant I had not imagined my own danger. Helen began sorting the papers into piles. First, the money. Transfers from a joint account into an account held by your husband and another woman may be highly relevant in a divorce or financial misconduct claim. I swallowed at the word divorce. She noticed. "I'm not telling you what you must do emotionally," she said. "I'm telling you what we need to protect legally." I nodded. Second, she continued tapping the hospital bill. "We need to verify what is actually owed. Do not rely on what your husband told you. We will request itemized billing and insurance explanations." My throat tightened. "He said I had to handle it alone." Helen's voice softened. That was cruelty, not legal fact. Cruelty. No one had named it so plainly before. Then she picked up the folder of house documents I had brought from the filing cabinet. "These are the deed papers." "Yes. My father helped me buy the house before I married Michael. Later, Michael moved in after we married. I don't understand all of it anymore." Helen adjusted her glasses and began reading. For several minutes, she said nothing. The silence made me nervous. Linda reached over and held my hand under the table. Then Helen turned one page, stopped, and read a section again. Her expression changed. What I asked. She did not answer right away. She pulled another document closer, then another. Finally, she looked up at me. "Sarah, did your father have his own attorney when these papers were prepared?" "Yes. He was very careful. He didn't trust easily." A faint smile touched Helen's mouth. "Good for him." "What does that mean?" Helen turned the document toward me, though the legal language still looked dense and foreign. "This house was originally conveyed to you separately before the marriage. Later documents allowed Michael certain occupancy and shared household responsibilities, but there is a protective clause here. It addresses coercion fraud and unauthorized encumbrance." I stared at her. "I don't know what that means." "It means your husband may not be able to use your medical fear, financial pressure, or misleading information to force you into refinancing or transferring control of the property. If he tries, this clause gives us something strong to stand on." For the first time in weeks, I felt air enter my lungs fully. "So he can't just take it?" Helen's eyes held mine. "Not if we move carefully." I covered my face with both hands. The tears came then. Not wild sobs, Just deep, exhausted tears from a woman who had been holding up a collapsing ceiling alone and had finally found a beam that might hold. Helen gave me a tissue and waited. When I lowered my hands, she said, "Sarah, from this moment forward, you do not sign anything your husband gives you. You do not discuss strategy with him. You keep communication brief. You preserve every record. And if he threatens you, you leave or call for help." I nodded. "I need to ask one more thing," she said. "What, does Michael know you came here?" "No." "Keep it that way for now." On the drive home, Linda and I did not speak much. The tote bag sat between my feet lighter because Helen had kept copies, but my life felt heavier and clearer at the same time. When we pulled onto my street, Michael's car was in the driveway. He was standing on the porch, waiting. Linda whispered, "Do you want me to come in?" I looked at Michael's face through the windshield. Suspicious, impatient, certain he still had the right to question every move I made. Then I thought of Helen's words. "Not if we move carefully." "No," I said, "but keep your phone close." I stepped out of the car holding my tote bag. Michael watched me walk up the path. "Prescription took a long time," he said. I met his eyes. "Yes," I answered. There was a lot to discuss. For the first time, I did not look away. Michael did not confront me that evening. That worried me more than shouting would have. He watched me, though. I felt his suspicion moving through the house like a draft under a closed door. When I set my tote bag in the bedroom, his eyes followed it. When I took my medication, he stood in the doorway longer than usual. When I sat in the armchair with a blanket over my lap, he looked at me as if trying to measure what had changed. But he said nothing about where I had been. That meant he was planning. By then I understood Michael better than I wanted to. His silence was never empty. It was a workshop. He went quiet when building a story, shaping an excuse, preparing a way to turn blame around, until I was the one defending myself. The next morning, he came into the kitchen carrying a folder. It was pale blue, the kind of folder he used for taxes or insurance papers. He placed it on the table beside my teacup with deliberate calm. "We need to talk," he said. I looked at the folder before I looked at him. Something inside me became very still. About what? The hospital bill, the house, our options. Our options. After everything I had heard in the garage, those words sounded almost obscene. I reached for my tea, buying myself one quiet second. Helen's voice came back to me. "Do not sign anything your husband gives you. Do not discuss strategy with him. Keep communication brief." What options? I asked. Michael pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. He had dressed carefully again, though we were only in our kitchen. Pressed shirt, combed hair, wedding ring polished bright on his finger. I wondered whether he wore it now as costume or habit. "We can refinance," he said. There it was. Not someday, not eventually. Now. He opened the folder and slid a stack of papers toward me. It would free up enough money to cover the medical expenses and stabilize things. I did not touch the papers. "How much are the medical expenses?" He blinked. "You saw the bill." "I saw one bill." "Helen." I stopped myself just in time. His eyes sharpened. "Who?" I lifted my teacup. "I mean, the hospital may send more paperwork." He studied me. "The number is the number Sarah." "No, Michael. Hospital billing changes after insurance adjustments." His mouth tightened. "You suddenly an expert now. I worked in a clinic for years, as an office assistant." The old Sarah would have absorbed that insult quietly. The new Sarah simply let it sit on the table between us, ugly and visible. Michael tapped the papers. "This is not complicated. We use the equity in the house, pay the hospital, consolidate some expenses, and get breathing room." Breathing room. A man who had tried to suffocate me financially was offering breathing room. What kind of refinance? I asked. He relaxed slightly, perhaps thinking my question meant I was considering it. "A home equity line. Possibly a cash-out refinance. The lender will decide which structure makes the most sense." "What lender?" He hesitated. Only for a second, but I saw it. "Someone I've worked with before. North Harbor." His face changed, not dramatically. Michael was too controlled for that, but his eyes cooled. "Why would you say that?" "Because that was the name on the envelope. That account has nothing to do with this." "Then, which lender?" He leaned back, frustrated. "You're missing the point." "No, I'm asking the point." He exhaled through his nose. "The house has value, Sarah. We're sitting on money while bills pile up. The house has value. Not our home has memories. Not your father helped you buy it. Value. Cash. Leverage." I looked down at the papers again. The top page had highlighted sections and small sticky tabs placed near signature lines. Michael had always liked sticky tabs. They made decisions look organized, inevitable. I could almost see the plan, place the papers in front of me while I was still recovering, make the hospital bill feel urgent, remind me I did not understand finances, point to the yellow tabs, and tell me where to sign. How many times had I signed forms in our marriage because Michael said, right here, Sarah, insurance renewals, tax papers, retirement forms. I had called it trust. Now I wondered whether trust had simply been training. I need time to read it, I said. His expression tightened. There's not much to read. Then it won't take me long. We need to act quickly. Why? Because bills don't wait. Neither do banks when money is moving where it shouldn't. The sentence left my mouth before I could stop it. Michael went still. The refrigerator hummed behind us. Outside, a bird called from the fence. The kitchen clock ticked once, twice, 3 times. Then Michael spoke very softly. You need to stop digging through things you don't understand. I met his eyes. I understand more than you think. His hand flattened on the table. Do you... There was a threat beneath the question, not loud enough to be named, but clear enough to feel. I thought of the recording. I thought of Emily's saved messages. I thought of Helen's sharp eyes reading the protective clause in my father's paperwork. And I did not shrink. I'm not signing today, I said. Michael's face flushed. No one said you had to sign today. I looked at the sticky tabs. He followed my gaze. That's just where signatures would go if we proceed. If. He smiled thinly. Yes, Sarah. If. But both of us knew he had not brought those papers to discuss if. He had brought them to finish something. He gathered the pages, then stopped halfway and pushed them back toward me. Fine. Read them. Maybe then you'll understand the position you put us in. The position I put us in. You got sick. You generated the bill. You want to act like I'm the villain because I'm trying to solve it. His voice rose for the first time. I glanced toward the hallway, not because I expected help, but because I suddenly understood how men like Michael used closed doors. They performed reasonableness in public and cruelty in private. I didn't choose to get sick, I said. No, but you choose to make everything harder. He stood abruptly. I have done everything for this family. I almost laughed. It came out as a breath. You moved our savings. His face darkened. I invested money with Denise Walker. She is not the issue. She is on an account with you. She knows the property market. She wrote perfect for us on a lakeside reserve brochure. His mouth opened. That one landed. I should not have said it. Helen had warned me not to reveal strategy or evidence, but I was tired of his lies walking around my kitchen wearing shoes I had bought. Tired of him acting offended while holding the match near the curtains. Michael's voice dropped. You went through my things. I went through our life and found another woman inside it. For a moment, I saw pure anger in him. It frightened me, but it also confirmed something. Behind all his lectures, all his calm explanations, all his financial language, there was a man furious that his wife had stopped being useful. Then he changed tactics. He sat down again. His face softened. It was almost worse. Sarah, he said, lowering his voice. You've been through a lot. The hospital scared you. I know I haven't handled everything perfectly. That was as close to an apology as Michael ever came. I haven't handled everything perfectly. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back before he could touch me. Pain crossed his face. Or maybe annoyance pretending to be pain. Denise's business, he said. No, you don't understand. No. She helped me see an opportunity. For who? For us. I shook my head. Do not say us when you mean you and her. His softness vanished. You're going to regret making me your enemy. The words sat there naked at last. Not husband. Enemy. I stood carefully, one hand on the table to steady myself. I'm going to rest. We are not done. I am. I picked up the folder. His eyes flashed. What are you doing? You told me to read it. I didn't say take it. How can I read it without taking it? For a second, I thought he might grab it from my hands. Instead, he forced a laugh. You always did know how to play helpless when it suited you. I held the folder against my chest. No, Michael. I'm learning how to stop playing helpless when it suits you. I walked to the bedroom, slowly refusing to hurry, refusing to let him see how hard my heart was pounding. Once inside, I locked the door. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, each signature line, each clause, each lender name. Some parts were dense, but one phrase jumped out at me. Transfer of security interest. Another borrower acknowledgement of sole consent. My stomach tightened. I sent every photo to Helen. Then I added one message. He brought these today. He wants me to sign. Helen replied less than 5 minutes later. Do not sign. These could affect control of the property. I'm reviewing now. Can you come to the bank with me tomorrow? Tomorrow? I stared at the word. Tomorrow was the day Michael had mentioned taking a drive to Lake Erie, the day he had likely planned to meet Denise, the day he thought I would still be confused, frightened, and trapped inside his version of events. I typed back, yes. Then I called Linda and asked if she could drive me again. After that, I sat on the edge of the bed with the blue folder beside me. On the other side of the door, Michael moved through the hallway. He paused once near the bedroom, and I watched the shadow of his feet beneath the door. He did not knock. He did not apologize. He simply stood there for several seconds, close enough that I could feel the weight of him. Then he walked away. I looked at the folder. For the first time, I understood how close I had come. If I had signed those papers at the kitchen table believing fear instead of truth, Michael might have turned my home into collateral for his escape. But tomorrow, I would walk into the bank with Helen Brooks, and Michael Garcia would not be the only person in the room who understood documents anymore. The next morning, Michael left the house before 8. He did not kiss my forehead. He did not ask how I slept. He did not mention the blue folder or the refinance papers still sitting on my nightstand. He simply walked through the kitchen with his phone in one hand and his car keys in the other, wearing the dark blazer from the Lakeside fundraiser photograph. "I have appointments," he said. Plural. Appointments. I looked up from my tea. "At Lake Erie?" His hand paused on the back door. "I don't need this today, Sarah." "No," I said softly. "I don't suppose you do." He stared at me for a moment, trying to read what I knew, what I had done, who I had told. Then his phone buzzed. His attention broke as it always did when another life called him. "Rest," he said. The word sounded like an order. After he left, I waited until his car was completely gone. Then I called Linda. She arrived in 12 minutes. This time, I did not carry a canvas tote bag. I carried a large brown envelope Helen had given me, marked only with my name. Inside were copies of everything: bank statements, hospital bill North Harbor, statement photographs of the refinance papers, the Lakeside Reserve brochure, and a printed transcript Helen's assistant had made from the garage recording. Seeing Michael's words typed on paper had made me feel sick all over again. If she's buried under that hospital bill, she won't have the energy or money to fight me. There are sentences that should never belong in a marriage. That one looked even colder in black ink. Helen was waiting for us outside First Central Bank, the bank where Michael and I had kept our joint accounts for years. She wore a gray suit and carried a leather briefcase. Beside her was a younger woman named Marissa, a paralegal from her office. "Good morning, Sarah," Helen said. I tried to smile. "I don't know if it is." "It will be useful," she said. "Sometimes that is enough." Useful. I held on to that word. Inside the bank, everything looked painfully ordinary. There was a stand with deposit slips, a bowl of wrapped peppermints, 2 tellers smiling behind glass, and a framed poster advertising retirement planning. I had been in that bank hundreds of times. I had deposited paychecks there, cashed birthday checks for Emily, opened a holiday savings account once when she was little. I had never imagined walking in with a lawyer to find out how much of my life had been quietly moved away. Helen had scheduled the meeting with a branch manager named Thomas Avery. He was a neat man in his 50s, with rimless glasses and a careful voice. At first, he looked concerned in a general customer service way. Then, Helen began laying out the documents, and his expression changed. "This is a joint savings account," Helen asked. "Yes," he said, looking at the statement. "Both Sarah Garcia and Michael Garcia are listed. And these external transfers," he adjusted his glasses. "They appear to have been authorized online." "By whom?" He clicked through his computer, then hesitated. "Mr. Garcia's login credentials were used for most of them." "Most of them." Helen's eyes sharpened. "Most," Mr. Avery clicked again. "There are a few entries that show authorization under Mrs. Garcia's profile." I sat up straighter. "I didn't authorize anything." He looked at me carefully. "Mrs. Garcia, have you shared your login credentials with your husband? I didn't even know I had separate ones." The room became very quiet. Helen leaned forward. "Can you print the activity logs? I can provide what policy allows with proper authorization." Helen slid a signed document across the desk. "Mrs. Garcia is authorizing release of activity connected to her joint account and user profile." Mr. Avery read it, then nodded. As the printer began humming behind him, I felt the old shame rising in me. That terrible voice saying, "You should have known, you should have checked, you should not have trusted so much." Helen must have seen it on my face because she spoke quietly without looking away from the manager. "Sarah, responsibility belongs to the person who misused trust, not the person who gave it." I blinked hard. The printer kept running. Page after page came out. Mr. Avery reviewed them, and his face grew more serious. "There are login attempts from multiple devices," he said. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means your profile was accessed from more than one device or location. I only use my laptop at home." He looked at Helen, then back at me. "One access point appears to match a device regularly associated with Mr. Garcia's login." My stomach tightened. "So he used my profile?" "I can't make legal conclusions," Mr. Avery said carefully. but the data suggests your credentials may have been accessed from a device he also used. Helen made a note. Then she said, "Let's talk about the hospital bill." Mr. Avery looked confused. The hospital bill? Helen opened another folder. Mrs. Garcia was told by her husband that the bill was substantially larger than expected and that joint funds were insufficient. "We are trying to determine whether insurance reimbursements or related deposits entered any Garcia accounts." Mr. Avery searched the account history. I watched his fingers move across the keyboard. Then he stopped. "There was a deposit from Buckeye Mutual Health Plan," he said. My heart began beating harder. "How much?" Helen asked. He named an amount that made my mouth go dry. It was not enough to explain everything, but it was enough to matter. Enough to cover a large portion of what Michael had told me was impossible. When Helen asked, "Mr. Avery gave a date, 2 days after I came home from the hospital." I stared at him. "Michael never told me." Helen's voice remained calm. "Where did the money go after it was deposited?" Mr. Avery clicked again. His face tightened. "Transferred out." "To where?" A pause. "An external account." "North Harbor Credit Union," Helen asked. He looked up. "I can't confirm ownership of an external account from here, but the routing information appears consistent with that institution." The room seemed to shrink around me. So, while I was sitting at the kitchen table with the hospital bill shaking in my hands while Michael was telling me, "It's your illness, Sarah. You handle it. Money from insurance had already arrived." And he had moved it. Not toward my care. Not toward the bill. Toward the account he shared with Denise. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry inside that bank. Helen placed the hospital bill in front of Mr. Avery. "We are also requesting assistance identifying whether any payments have been made directly to the hospital from these accounts." He checked. "No recent hospital payment from the joint account." Of course not. Michael had not wanted the bill paid. The unpaid bill was useful. It was pressure. It was fear in envelope form. Mr. Avery printed another set of records. Helen reviewed them, then slid one page toward me. "Sarah, look here." I followed her finger. "There was a transfer from our joint savings to North Harbor for $12,000 dated 3 weeks before the hospital event. Another for $5,000 after. Another for $8,500 shortly after the insurance deposit." "Do these look familiar?" Helen asked. "No." "Did you sign any written authorization for these?" "No." She turned to Mr. Avery. "Are there signature cards or transfer authorization forms associated with any of these?" He reviewed again, then said, "Some external transfer setup documents are on file. May we see them?" It took several minutes. Another bank employee came in. More forms were pulled. The air in the office felt heavier with each sheet of paper. Finally, Mr. Avery placed copies on the desk. My name was there. Sarah Garcia. The signature looked almost like mine. Almost. But not quite. The S was too sharp. The G in Garcia looped the wrong way. The slant was wrong. I knew my own signature the way a woman knows the sound of her child's footsteps. "That's not mine," I whispered. Helen did not look surprised. "Are you certain?" "Yes." She circled the signature without touching the original copy. "Mr. Avery, please preserve all related records, including digital access logs, device metadata, document timestamps, and any branch video if available." Mr. Avery's face had gone pale. "I'll escalate this to our fraud department." "Fraud." The word landed like a gavel. I had thought of betrayal, adultery, cruelty, manipulation, but fraud sounded official. It sounded like the world outside my marriage finally had a name for what Michael had done. Helen closed the folder. "We will also need written confirmation of the insurance deposit and subsequent transfer." Mr. Avery nodded. "I'll prepare what I can today and coordinate with fraud review." When we stood to leave, my legs felt weak. Linda took my arm, but I did not collapse. I walked out of that office slowly past the peppermints and deposit slips and smiling tellers, carrying a truth that was heavier than any hospital bill. Outside, the sun was bright enough to make me squint. Helen walked with me to Linda's car. "Sarah," she said, "this is significant. He forged my name. We need the bank's formal review, but based on what you showed me and what we saw today, there is a strong concern that your authorization was misused. And the insurance money. It appears your husband received or had access to funds related to your medical costs and transferred money away while telling you the opposite." I looked toward the street where cars moved normally, people going to work, buying coffee, living ordinary lives. "He wanted me scared," I said. Helen's face softened. "Yes, he wanted me too poor to fight." "Yes." "And the hospital bill was never the real problem." Helen shook her head. "No, Sarah. The hospital bill was the tool." The tool. That was the whole lie. Michael had made my illness into a weapon, my fear into a leash, my house into a prize, and my trust into an access code. My phone buzzed. For one terrible second, I thought it was Michael. It was Emily. "Boarding now. I'll be there soon. I love you." I held the phone against my heart. Helen said, "Go home carefully. Say as little as possible. Emily's arrival may change his behavior, so be prepared." What if he asks where I went? Tell him you handled some medical paperwork. That is true. I almost smiled at that. Handled some medical paperwork. For once, the truth could protect me too. On the ride home, Linda drove in silence. Halfway there, she reached over and patted my hand. "You're doing good," she said. "I don't feel good." That's not what I said. When I got home, Michael's car was not in the driveway. For the first time in days, I stepped into my house without feeling watched. I went straight to the kitchen table and looked at the place where he had slid the hospital bill toward me. I could still hear his voice. "It's your illness, Sarah. You handle it." I placed my palm flat on the table. "I am handling it," I whispered. But not the way he expected. I did not plan the dinner as revenge. That is what people might think when they hear this part of the story. They might imagine me setting the table with shaking hands, rehearsing accusations, preparing to destroy Michael the way he had tried to destroy me. But the truth is quieter than that. I planned the dinner because I needed one final test. Not for the evidence. I had enough of that. Not for Helen. She already knew what to do next. Not even for Emily, who was landing in Columbus that evening and had promised to come straight to the house without telling her father. The test was for me. I needed to sit across from Michael one more time and see whether there was any trace of the man I had once loved. Any shame. Any fear for what he had done to me. Any willingness to tell the truth before truth was forced upon him. So I cooked. Not a feast. My body could not handle that. Just chicken and rice green beans and the cornbread recipe my mother used to make in a cast iron skillet. The kitchen filled with the familiar smell of butter and warm cornmeal, and for a moment, I had to sit down because memory can be as sharp as grief. How many dinners had I cooked for Michael Thousands? How many evenings had I placed a plate before him while he complained about work, about neighbors, about politics, about bills, about traffic, about everything except his own character? Too many. At 5:30, Helen called. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" she asked. "I'm not going to threaten him," I said. "I'm not going to negotiate. I just want him to know that I know. Emily will be there. She's on her way from the airport." Linda nearby. Across the street. Phone on. Good. Keep your phone recording if the law in your situation allows you to preserve your own conversation. Do not provoke him. Do not block an exit. If he becomes aggressive, leave. I looked at the kitchen table. On one chair sat a folder containing copies of the hospital bill, the bank records, the North Harbor statement, the forged transfer forms, the lakeside brochure, and the transcript of the garage call. "I understand." Helen's voice softened. "Sarah, you do not owe him a dramatic confrontation." "I know." Then why I looked out the window at the rose bushes my father helped me plant. Because I have spent 38 years lowering my voice so he could feel tall. I want to hear myself speak clearly once. Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Call me afterward." Michael came home at 6:12. I noted the time automatically now. Betrayal had turned me into a woman who remembered details. He entered through the back door, carrying the smell of cologne and lake air. I was standing at the stove stirring rice. He looked surprised. "You cooked?" "Yes. What's the occasion I turned off the burner?" "I thought we should have dinner together." His eyes narrowed slightly, but hunger and ego overcame suspicion. Michael liked being served. He liked rituals that placed him at the center of a room. He washed his hands and sat at the table. For a little while, we ate like strangers, pretending not to be standing on a cracked floor. He talked about traffic. He said he had driven farther than expected. He complained about gas prices. He told me the green beans needed salt. I watched his hands. The same hands that had signed forms with my name. The same hands that had held a bank statement with Denise Walker's name on it. The same hands that had slid a hospital bill toward me and called my illness my responsibility. Halfway through dinner, he said, "Did you read the refinance papers I placed my fork down?" "Yes. And I won't be signing them." His jaw tightened. "We've been over this." "No." "You talked. I listened. That is not the same thing." He stared at me. "You're being reckless." "Am I?" "Yes, Sarah. You are. You have no idea how serious our situation is." I reached for the folder on the chair beside me and placed it on the table. "I know exactly how serious it is." Michael's eyes dropped to the folder. Something in his face shifted. "What is that?" I opened it slowly. First, I took out the hospital bill and laid it between us. "You used this to scare me." He leaned back. "I used it to show you reality." "No." Reality is the insurance deposit you never told me about. His face stilled. I placed the bank record beside the bill. Buckeye Mutual Health Plan deposited money 2 days after I came home. You transferred funds out afterward. That was more complicated than I placed another page down. North Harbor Credit Union. He stopped. Then another. The account with Denise Walker. His eyes hardened. Sarah. Then another. Transfers from our joint savings. His hand moved toward the papers, but I put my palm over them. Copies, I said. The word froze him. I saw it land. He had not understood until that moment that taking the papers would not take the truth. These are copies, I repeated. Helen has copies. Emily has the recording. The bank fraud department has records. His face flushed deep red. Helen Brooks. He pushed his chair back. You went to a lawyer. Yes, you had no right. I almost laughed then, not because it was funny, but because there it was, again, the outrage of a man who believed wrongdoing was private property. I had every right. You went behind my back. You built an account behind my life. His mouth tightened. Denise's business. I placed the Lakeside Reserve brochure on the table. Lot 14. He said nothing. Perfect for us, I asked. His eyes flicked down, and for the first time, shame appeared. Not enough. But some. It vanished quickly. You went through my private things and found our money. You are twisting everything. I pulled out the transcript of the garage call. Would you like me to play it? The color drained from his face. For a second, the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. What are you talking about? He said. I read from the page. If she's buried under that hospital bill, she won't have the energy or money to fight me. Michael's lips parted. I looked at him across the table where I had served him meals for nearly 4 decades. That is your voice. He stood so abruptly his chair struck the wall behind him. You recorded me. You confessed near a vent. That is illegal. Helen disagrees. He began pacing. The mask was cracking now. Not gently, not with regret, with fury. You don't understand what you've done. I understand what you did. You think Emily is going to thank you for destroying this family? My chest tightened at our daughter's name. You tried to keep Emily away while I was in the hospital. I was protecting her. You told her I was exaggerating. You were emotional. I was having a heart event. He slammed his hand on the table. The plates jumped. Fear shot through me sharp and old, but I did not move. From my pocket, my phone was already recording. Michael noticed my stillness. He dragged both hands over his face, then lowered his voice. Sarah, he said suddenly soft. Listen to me. There it was. The turn. Anger had failed. Now came pleading. I made mistakes, he said. I should have told you more, but I was under pressure. You don't know what it's like carrying everything. I stared at him. Carrying everything. The finances. The future. Your health. The house. You carried money to Denise. He flinched. She helped me feel alive again. The sentence was so small and selfish that it almost emptied me of anger. For a moment I saw him clearly. Not as a mastermind. Not as a monster from a movie. Just a vain aging man who had mistaken betrayal for rebirth and cruelty for strategy. And what was I supposed to feel, I asked. He looked away. What was I supposed to feel, Michael, when I came home from the hospital and you told me to handle the bill alone? No answer. What was I supposed to feel when you tried to make me sign away control of my father's house? Still no answer. What was I supposed to feel when I heard you tell another woman that my fear helped you? His shoulders sagged. Then he whispered, I didn't mean for it to get this far. That was the closest thing to truth he had said all night. But it did. I said. He looked at me, and for one terrible second I saw the man I had married. Older now, smaller, frightened, maybe even sorry that he had been caught, if not sorry that he had done it. Sarah, he said, we can fix this. No, you don't want to be alone. That would have worked on me once. The threat of loneliness had kept many women quiet. Women like me were taught that an imperfect husband was better than an empty house, that starting over after 60 was foolish, that dignity could be sacrificed for company. But the hospital had taught me something. A person can be lying next to you and still leave you alone. A person can share your table and still starve your heart. I have been alone for a long time, I said. I'm just finally admitting it. His face twisted. You're going to throw away 38 years? No, Michael. You already did. I'm refusing to let you throw away what's left of me. At that exact moment, headlights swept across the front window. Michael turned his head. A car door closed. Then another. My heart began to pound. Footsteps crossed the porch. Michael looked back at me. Who is that? Before I could answer, the front door opened with the key I had left under the planter for my daughter years ago. Emily stepped into the hallway with her overnight bag still over her shoulder, her face pale from travel and shock. Behind her stood Linda, silent but firm. Michael froze. Emily looked at the table, the papers, the bill, the transcript. Then she looked at her father. "I heard enough from the porch," she said, her voice shaking. "But I need you to say it to my face." Michael opened his mouth. For once, no lie came out quickly enough. Emily had always been her father's soft spot. At least that was what I believed for most of her life. Michael could be impatient with me, dismissive of neighbors, cold toward strangers. But with Emily, he had once been gentle. He taught her to ride a bike in the church parking lot. He built her a bookshelf when she went through her horse novel phase. He cried quietly in the garage after dropping her off at college, though he denied it when I found him there. That was why the look on his face when she stepped into the hallway broke something in me. It was not joy. It was not relief. It was panic. "Emily," he said, "what are you doing here?" She stood with her overnight bag still hanging from her shoulder, rainwater dotting her jacket from the walk up the porch. Linda remained behind her, one hand near her phone, her face steady and unreadable. Emily looked from him to me, then to the papers spread across the kitchen table. "I came because Mom needed me." Michael's mouth tightened. "Your mother is confused." The words came so quickly that I almost felt sorry for him. He had reached for the old weapon by instinct. Emily's face changed. "Don't," she said. "Don't what? Don't call her confused because she caught you." Michael looked as if she had slapped him. "Emily, you don't understand what's happening here. I heard the recording." The kitchen went still. His eyes flicked to me. "You sent that to her?" "Yes," I said. He turned back to Emily. "That was taken out of context." Emily dropped her bag near the wall. "Then give me the context." Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. She stepped closer to the table and picked up the transcript. Her hands shook as she read the line I knew had already burned itself into her heart. "If she's buried under that hospital bill, she won't have the energy or money to fight me." Her voice cracked halfway through, but she finished. Then she looked at her father. "What context makes that okay?" Michael rubbed his forehead. "I was frustrated." "No," Emily said. "Frustrated is saying something sharp. This is a plan." He pointed toward me. "Your mother has been feeding you one side of the story." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed strong. "She didn't even tell me everything at first. You were the one who called me from the hospital and told me not to come. I didn't want you to panic. You told me she was exaggerating. She was emotional. She was sick." He looked away. For the first time, I saw Emily not as my little girl, not as the young woman I still worried about across state lines, but as an adult daughter, standing in the wreckage of her parents' marriage and choosing truth over comfort. It hurt to see. It healed me too. Michael tried again. Sweetheart marriages are complicated. Don't sweetheart me." His face tightened. "I am still your father, and she is still my mother." The silence after that sentence was deep. Michael had expected anger from me, maybe even suspicion from Linda. But Emily's refusal to bend seemed to shake him in a way nothing else had. His daughter had always been part of the image he kept of himself. Provider, father, decent man. Now she was standing in our kitchen, looking directly at the truth he had hidden behind that image. He reached for the back of a chair and lowered himself into it. "I made mistakes," he said. Emily let out a small bitter laugh. "Mistakes." "Yes, mistakes. With money. With Denise. With how I handled your mother's hospital stay." I looked at him carefully. There it was again. Handled. As if I were paperwork. As if my pain had been an administrative inconvenience. Emily picked up the North Harbor statement. "Who is Denise Walker?" Michael's eyes moved toward the floor. "A woman I know. A woman you opened a secret account with. It was for investment purposes. A woman you planned to buy a lake house with." He did not answer. Emily's eyes widened slightly as if part of her still hoped he would deny it better. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Emily, no. Just answer one thing. Did you use money from the joint account with Mom?" Michael's jaw flexed. "I moved funds temporarily. That is not an answer." He looked at me then, and there was anger in his eyes again. He hated that the language of accountability was spreading. He hated that I was no longer the only woman in the room he had to silence. "Yes," he said finally. Some money was moved. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth. "And the hospital bill?" Michael looked exhausted now, but not in a way that invited pity. He looked like a man tired of holding up too many lies. I was trying to manage the situation. Emily shook her head. "You used it to scare her." His silence answered. Linda shifted near the doorway. Michael noticed and snapped, "Why is she here?" Linda raised one eyebrow. "Because Sarah asked me to be. This is family business." "No," Emily said. "This is what you say when you want no witnesses." For a moment, I thought Michael might explode. His face reddened. His hand closed into a fist on the table, then opened again. He stood, walked toward the sink, then turned back. "You all think I'm some villain," he said. I said nothing. Emily did. "I think you became someone I don't recognize." That wounded him. I saw it. For the first time that night, genuine pain crossed his face. But pain is not the same as remorse. A man can be hurt because he is exposed, not because he is sorry. I gave this family everything, he said. "No," I said quietly. "You gave yourself permission to take everything." He looked at me, and for once, he did not have a quick answer. Emily sat down beside me, not across from me. Beside me. It was such a small act, but after weeks of feeling alone in my own home, that movement nearly undid me. She took my hand under the table. "Mom," she said, "what do you want to happen tonight?" Michael looked at me too. So did Linda. I realized then that everyone was waiting for my voice, not Michael's. Mine. I took a slow breath. "I want your father to leave the house tonight." Michael laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "Absolutely not." "This house is protected," I said. Helen explained it. "Helen doesn't decide where I sleep." "No. But I decide who stays in a home where I am recovering from a heart event and being pressured to sign papers." He stared at me. "You are really doing this?" "Yes. After 38 years. Because of 38 years." Emily squeezed my hand. Michael turned to her. "You're going to let her throw me out?" Emily's voice was quiet. "You threw yourself out when you decided her illness was useful." His face crumpled for a second. Then the anger came back, but weaker now, almost desperate. "I have nowhere to go." I thought of Denise, of Lot 14, of the lake cottage marked pending, of a secret account with nearly $250,000. "That must be frightening," I said. "You should understand that feeling. You worked very hard to give it to me." Linda's mouth tightened. Not quite a smile. Michael looked around the kitchen as if searching for an ally in the cabinets, the walls, the floorboards, the old yellow paint. But the house no longer belonged to his version of the story. Finally, he grabbed his keys. "I'll go to a hotel." "Take what you need for tonight," Emily said. "Not documents, not Mom's papers." He glared at her. "You don't get to police me." "No," she said. "But I can call Helen, or the bank fraud department, or the police if you start taking things that don't belong to you." My sweet Emily. My daughter who used to cry when commercials showed abandoned puppies. She stood there now with tears on her face and steel in her voice. Michael walked down the hallway to the bedroom. Emily followed at a distance. Linda stayed with me. I sat at the kitchen table listening to drawers open and close. Each sound made my body tense, but Emily's voice came once from the hallway. "Only close, Dad." He muttered something I could not hear. 10 minutes later, he returned with a small overnight bag. He looked older, smaller, but still angry enough to be dangerous in the way cornered pride can be. At the back door, he stopped and turned to me. "You'll regret humiliating me." I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had become a stranger while sleeping beside me. "No, Michael," I said. "I regret trusting you more than I trusted myself." He left. The door closed behind him with a sound that seemed to pass through every year of our marriage. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Emily came to me. I stood slowly, and my daughter wrapped her arms around me with such force that I had to remind her gently about my chest. She loosened her hold, crying into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. I closed my eyes and held her. "You came," I said. "That's enough." Linda wiped her eyes near the doorway and pretended she wasn't. We thought that was the last shock of the night. It wasn't. At 10:43 p.m., while Emily was making tea and Linda was checking that the windows were locked, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not recognize. There was no greeting, just one sentence. "You should know Michael lied to me too. He said the house was already his to sell." Below it was a screenshot from Denise Walker, a withdrawal confirmation from the North Harbor account. Large enough to make me sit down again, Emily read it over my shoulder. "She took money from him," she whispered. I looked at the screenshot, then toward the door Michael had walked through. For a strange, quiet second, I felt no triumph, only the deep exhaustion of seeing greed turn on itself. Michael had betrayed me for Denise, and Denise, it seemed, had already begun betraying him. Michael did not come home the next morning. For the first time in 38 years, I woke up in my own bed without hearing him clear his throat in the bathroom, without the smell of his coffee drifting down the hallway, without his footsteps moving through the house as if every room belonged more to him than to me. The silence should have frightened me. Instead, it felt unfamiliar in a gentler way. Emily slept in the guest room. Linda had gone home after midnight, but called before breakfast to check on us. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea looking at the empty chair across from me. The same chair where Michael had lied, blamed, threatened, pleaded, and finally watched his daughter choose truth. I expected to feel victorious. I did not. Victory is too loud a word for the morning after your marriage collapses. What I felt was tired, hollow, relieved in places, aching in others. I had not stopped loving the man Michael used to be in one clean moment. Love does not always obey evidence. Sometimes it lingers like perfume in a room after the person has left. But I no longer confused love with permission. That was the difference. By 9 o'clock, Helen called. I received the screenshot from Denise, she said. Emily had forwarded everything to her the night before. What does it mean? It means the North Harbor account may now involve disputed withdrawals between Michael and Denise as well. That does not erase what he did to you, but it may make his situation more complicated. I almost laughed, but it came out as a tired breath. He betrayed me with a woman who betrayed him. People who build relationships on deception often discover there is no loyalty inside them, Helen said. That sentence stayed with me. Over the next several weeks, my life became a series of appointments forms, phone calls, and careful steps toward freedom. Helen filed the necessary legal notices to protect the house from any unauthorized refinancing or transfer. The protective clause my father had insisted on decades earlier became the shield I never knew I had. Every time Helen explained it, I thought of my father sitting at his old oak desk reading documents with a magnifying glass, telling me Sarah, love is good, but paper remembers when people don't. I had laughed at him back then. I was not laughing anymore. The bank fraud department opened a formal review. First Central Bank preserved access logs and transfer records. North Harbor Credit Union froze certain activity after questions arose about the source of funds and the dispute between Michael and Denise. Buckeye Mutual Health Plan confirmed the insurance-related deposit Michael had never disclosed to me. And the hospital bill. That was the part that nearly made me sit down in the hallway outside Helen's office. The number Michael had used to terrify me was not the final amount, not even close. After insurance adjustments, corrections, and the payment that should have been applied earlier, the true remaining balance was painful but manageable. Not nothing, not easy, but not the mountain Michael had described. Helen's assistant helped me call the billing department and request an itemized statement. We set up a reasonable payment plan while the insurance deposit issue was reviewed. When I hung up, I cried. Not because of the money, because I finally understood how carefully Michael had chosen my fear. He knew I would panic over debt. He knew I would blame myself for being sick. He knew I would feel guilty enough to sign anything if I believed the house was at risk because of me. But the house had never been at risk because of my heart. It had been at risk because of his greed. Michael tried calling Emily first. She did not answer. Then he called me. I let it go to voicemail. His first messages were angry. You can't just lock me out of my own life. You and Emily are overreacting. Helen is turning you against me. Then came the pleading. Sarah, please, I made mistakes, but we can talk. I don't know what Denise told you, but she lied too. I never meant to hurt you this much. That last one was interesting. This much. As if a smaller wound would have been acceptable. Helen advised me not to respond except through proper channels, so I didn't. Not because it was easy. There were nights when I sat in my chair, phone in my lap, wanting to ask him why. Wanting him to explain how a man could share a bed with a woman for decades and still look at her illness as an opening. But the truth was, no answer would heal that. Some questions are traps. They keep you standing at the door of someone who already showed you what lives inside. Emily stayed for 2 weeks. At first, she treated me like glass. She hovered when I stood up, checked whether I had taken medication, watched my face if I climbed the stairs too quickly. I had to remind her more than once, honey, I am recovering, not disappearing. One afternoon, we sat together in the kitchen, the same kitchen where everything had broken open, and she said, I keep thinking I should have known. I reached across the table and took her hand. No, that belongs to him. But he was my dad. He still is, I said gently. But being your father doesn't erase what he did as my husband. Her eyes filled with tears. I hate that both things are true. So do I. That was part of the healing too, letting truth be complicated without letting it become unclear. Michael eventually agreed through his attorney to retrieve personal belongings while Linda, Emily, and a representative from Helen's office were present. He looked thinner when he came, less polished. The dark blazer was gone. His eyes avoided mine. He packed clothes, a few books, old fishing gear, and personal items from his desk. Fishing gear. I almost smiled at the sight of it. That clean rod, those unused lures, the costume of a lie. Before he left, he paused in the living room. Sarah, he said. Everyone went still. I looked at him. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words, finally. But they arrived late, carrying too little. I nodded once. I hope someday you understand what you destroyed. His eyes reddened. I do. Maybe he did. Maybe he only understood what it had cost him. I no longer needed to decide. After he left, Emily locked the door. Then she leaned against it and cried. I did not cry that time. I walked to the kitchen instead. The kitchen had become the room where my life seemed to keep changing. The heart pain, the hospital bill, the bank envelope, the confrontation. For weeks, I had hated walking into it. So I changed it. Not all at once. I did not have the energy or the money for a grand renovation. But I painted the walls a warm cream instead of faded yellow. Emily helped me replace the curtains. Linda's nephew fixed the cabinet hinge Michael had ignored for years. I bought new mugs because I could no longer look at the empty space where the broken one used to be. The first recovered funds came through months later. Not all of it. Legal matters take time, and some money had already been tangled in Michael's mess with Denise and the lake property. But enough came back to make me sit quietly at my desk and breathe. I used the first portion to pay the true remaining hospital balance. The real one. The smaller one. The one Michael could have helped me handle from the beginning if cruelty had not served him better. When I mailed that payment, I stood at the mailbox for a long moment with my hand resting on the lid. Then I whispered, "Done." Not everything was done, of course. The legal process continued. Michael faced financial consequences and possible fraud-related claims. Denise disappeared from his life as quickly as she had entered mine, leaving behind withdrawals, lies, and the ruin of whatever fantasy he thought she represented. But I was done carrying the part that was never mine. I joined a women's group at the local library that fall. At first I went because Emily insisted I needed people who didn't require legal documentation. I expected awkward conversation and weak coffee. I found widows' retirees, divorced women, caregivers, grandmothers, former nurses, teachers, one retired truck driver named Joanne who could make the whole room laugh with a single eyebrow raise. They did not pity me. That helped. They let me be angry some days and grateful others. They taught me which bank forms to ask for, which online passwords to change, which flowers grow best in stubborn Ohio soil. One woman helped me create a budget that I understood line by line. For the first time in my adult life, I knew exactly where my money was. That knowledge felt like oxygen. Emily still lived in Denver, but she visited more often. Sometimes we cooked dinner together in the cream-colored kitchen. Sometimes we sat on the porch with blankets and said nothing at all. Silence with her felt different from silence with Michael. It did not ask me to disappear. One evening, months after Michael left, I found an old photo album in the hall closet. Pictures of our wedding, Emily as a baby, birthdays, vacations, ordinary years. I sat on the floor and looked through them slowly. I did not throw them away. That surprised me. But healing, I learned, is not pretending nothing good ever existed. It is accepting that good memories can belong to a story that still ended badly. It is letting the past be real without letting it run the rest of your life. I closed the album and placed it back on the shelf. Then I went outside to water the roses. The same roses my father helped me plant. The evening air was cool. The porch light came on automatically. Across the street, Linda waved from her driveway. I waved back. For the first time in a long time, the house felt quiet without feeling lonely. Michael had left me a hospital bill. But what he really left behind was proof. Proof of his lie. Proof of my strength. Proof that a woman can be frightened, heartbroken, and tired and still rise from the kitchen table with her name, her home, and her dignity intact. Sometimes the deepest betrayal does not arrive as shouting slammed doors or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it arrives quietly hidden inside a bill, a bank statement, a signature line, or a sentence meant to make you doubt yourself. Sarah's story reminds us that trust is beautiful, but trust should never require blindness. Love should never ask a woman to give up her voice, her safety, her home, or her right to know the truth. What Michael mistook for weakness was actually patience. What he mistook for ignorance was loyalty. And what he mistook for silence became the very space where Sarah gathered her strength. There is no age limit on starting over. At 62, Sarah did not become bitter. She became awake. She learned her finances. She protected her home. She allowed her daughter and her friends to stand beside her. Most importantly, she stopped believing that being alone was worse than being betrayed beside someone. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone use money, illness, or family trust as a weapon? What would you have done if you were Sarah? And if you feel comfortable, share where you are watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes stories like this help someone else feel less alone. Please like this video if Sarah's courage moved you and subscribe for more emotional family stories about betrayal, truth, justice, and healing.